Welcome, everybody, to a new episode of the Deadliest Warrior podcast. I want to get something out right out the gate. We are not celebrating these guys.
Nope.
Not at all. No.
But hopefully this podcast episode can prevent future tragedies and genocides. I don't think that's too bold of a claim to make.
You're correct.
Am I wrong in assuming that these are two evil men?
Yeah.
Just bad guys.
How could they get other human beings to behave this way?
And we're going to analyze that by blowing up jail torsos and foam dummies.
Right.
And analyzing their dominance.
We have to investigate this.
We do have to investigate this. Guys, if you haven't figured it out already, we are diving into the controversial episode of Season 3, Saddam Hussein versus Pol Pot. Let's intro our warriors here. Saddam Hussein, Iraqi tyrant whose Republican God slaughtered not only his enemies, but his own people. Versus Pol Pot, the Cambodian dictator whose Khmer Rouge guerrillas committed genocide on a quarter of the country's population. I am your host today, Matt Davis, and I am joined by Team Saddam, is what you guys wanted to be called.
Yeah.
We've got fellow hosts.
I am famous Saddam Hussein supporter.
Starting off strong.
Saddam Hussein expert.
I am not representing Saddam Hussein, but I did do research on him.
And of course, providing the research for Pol Pot, we have a special guest star,
Scott.
yeah, and self-proclaimed pothead,
Pol Pot descendant, Craig Taylor.
Craig. You've called yourself a Pol Pot head, a
That's what I'm naming my fantasy football team next year.
Potheads.
The polls are in. You're a pothead.
So,
Guys, we're not celebrating these guys.
No,
we're not
no.
celebrating these guys.
guys, to break the kayfabe here, this is the problematic episode of Season 3. Deadliest Warrior always likes to give us one controversial one every season. We had IRA versus Taliban in Season 1. We had the Waffen SS versus the Viet Cong in Season 2. Now we get two named guys, Saddam Hussein and Pol Pot.
In my opinion, out of like all of those episodes, out of the show and out of those three controversial episodes, this is the most out of touch with like society.
Speaking of
the
out of
most
touch,
insensitive episode.
Speaking of out of touch, similar to our intro, this episode kicks off with Dorian, Dr. Dorian, giving us the line.
I want to set the tone right off the bat. We are not celebrating these guys, but by actually seeing what these guys have done and recognizing the way they did it, it may prevent future massacres, future genocides.
Craig, you pointed out to us earlier this week, this may be the funniest line in the entire show.
I just want to emphasize, because we always like to look at the implications of these statements, especially on like the aftermath. This is Dr. Dorian suggesting that this episode may cause, prevent Freudian slip, may prevent a future genocide.
Everyone knows the best way to prevent a genocide is junk food TV.
A non-historical or scientific look at two awful people and just blowing shit up.
Yeah, and analyzing how they blew shit up.
I think if back in the 1970s, Richard Nixon had sat down and figured out what had the edge between an RPK and the RPD, America might have been able to intervene positively and stop the Cambodian genocide.
I get the angle he's probably going for, of course, is like, oh, we learned from history to prevent the mistakes of our past, but like,
not like this.
yeah.
Can I tell you, I think they accomplished this because on Amazon, the tag for this episode was compelling.
Compelling, yeah.
Very compelling.
Probably the worst word you can associate with Deadliest Warrior. Yeah. And the other thing, too, with Pol Pot, I lost my train of thought.
Right, the thing about Pol Pot you have to understand is
He's a douche.
he may seem like a bad guy, but,
Yeah. Oh, I know what I was going to say. I don't know if I respect the IRA Taliban approach of, let's just do it. Fuck it. And have a little warning and that's it. Or them humiliating themselves, having to explain, okay, here's what we're doing. Like,
I respected the former more because it is bold-faced, like, hey, this is a Spike TV show. We're going to exploit some of this bad stuff, but it'll be entertaining. You're gonna get to see mannequins dressed as Taliban with fake beards and turbans on, and we're gonna light them on fire. Versus this, where they're trying to have their cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
You know, this is all about like, guys, we're really taking a look. They bring on real survivors.
Don't piss on us and tell us it's raining.
Yeah.
Like, don't bullshit.
Real survivors, people, but they gloss over like these two guys rise to power, and then the majority of the episode is like, all right, so between the Chinese stick grenade and the RG-5, what do we think has the bigger boom?
How about the unprecedented amount of just real footage they powder in through the episode,
Yeah.
and every scene in this episode is just someone getting annihilated by like, you know, just people lined up on a wall getting gunned down or something. It's just like bam, 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 rapid fire.
Do you think making it the dictator versus the dictator, they thought like, oh, this is an easier pill to swallow versus Khmer Rouge versus Republican Guard? Like, do you think that's part of the reason why they do it like
Pinning it
that?
all on one
I
guy.
almost
Yeah.
think that would make more sense in the context of the show.
Well, in
But,
season
like,
3, there's no. Oh no, that's not true. There
Yeah.
are some generic.
Yeah.
It's very rare that it's generic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The majority of the episodes in season 3 are named people, and I think that's because it makes like X factors easier,
Right.
history easier, because you can narrow it down to an individual.
That makes
Well,
sense.
I think that would make more sense if they looked at the armies, because then you could be like, okay, you could get more in depth and like, oh, this army, you know, like the Khmer Rouge was made up of a lot of children and stuff, instead of just taking the like notorious leader guy.
Yeah.
because that's weird applying like stats of the leader to a squad.
Yeah.
And you get into the Deadliest Warrior problem, which we'll get into.
Right. Yeah.
Listen, it's already a bad idea, but if you're gonna do it, I mean,
Do it right.
Before introducing these warriors, I'd like to ask you guys, I like to kick off anytime I host with any memories about this episode from when it originally came out. Lucas, you want to kickstart us off here?
I just remember this episode. I regarded it as just like a bad idea back then. I probably still stand by that opinion. There's not too many memorable things because the tests are done in a really weird fashion in this one, and I don't know. I was watching. I was like, how do they fill 40 minutes with this? Because it's a very stripped down episode. We don't get like the touch table or anything in it.
Yeah,
so
right.
I honestly did not remember a lot from this episode outside of Calvin's good looks.
Right, yeah. We'll get into Chad Thundercock, Calvin. I'm glad you brought a movie for the table, Lucas. Dan, you were supposed to bring us your Browning High Power inscribed by Saddam Hussein.
Right.
But
Big
you,
slip up.
you
I
left
mean,
it at home.
Yeah.
Big fuck up, dude. Come on.
I'll think about bringing it on the next episode I come up for, which is none.
Right, never. Yeah. That's very classy of you, Dan.
Yeah, all the controversial episodes are done after this one.
When was that?
Dan?
The war in Iraq, 2003? Yeah, when I was in Saddam's personal guard, I was like 6.
Yeah, you're 6 years old.
Coming through the ranks, flying up.
You could have been a Khmer Rouge soldier, you know? You are old enough to meet that criteria.
God.
Dan, do you have any memories about the episode?
Honestly, not really. I definitely appreciated the episode more now that I realize Fahim Fazli is Saddam Hussein.
Oh, yeah.
But like way back when watching this, it felt like kind of a filler for me.
Yeah, I wrote that I recognize Fahim Fazli because we looked it up. He also kind of looks like Ron Jeremy.
He does. He does
He's like the
have-
mustache.
Yeah.
You're still selling me on it.
Yeah. Scott, Craig, any memories about this episode?
This came out in what, like 2011?
Yeah.
So this was like we were in 11th grade. I remember in 10th grade, and we may get into this in talking about movies or books. We had to read a book in the 10th grade about the Cambodian genocide.
It was like a whole unit.
So
everybody had to do it.
The first half of the year was all based on that book, and the second half of that year, you picked a book of your own, and I chose to read the sequel to that book. So when this episode came out, I thought, no 11th grader, it's important to know this stuff, but no 11th grader should just have this much knowledge.
Retained information.
I legitimately felt Cambodian genocide expert by this point. with
Yeah.
this episode. The stuff just kept following me. The simulations.
Any relevance I have in my memory to this episode comes from that.
Yeah, I do mention that in Matt's movie corner. Craig, any memories about this show?
No.
Okay.
Other than like around the time, like Scott was saying, we had the Cambodian genocide unit. I do appreciate that they highlight this because for us it's like ubiquitous because our entire high school had a section on the Cambodian genocide, but definitely lesser known compared to like the Holocaust. And I don't want to say it, you can't really compare these things as worse, but there's a lot of aspects to this that are different than the Holocaust. So I think it's, I'm glad they at least highlighted this, that there's one positive to take from this episode.
Well, as they introduce the warriors in this episode, Dorian gives us what he calls the tale of the tape. Saddam stats: age 50, height 6'2", weight 215 pounds. He's a bit of a beefcake. And Craig, the return of one of your favorite markers, the Reign of Terror.
Reign of Terror is back, baby.
Reign of Terror, 1979 to 2003. And as we already mentioned, Saddam is portrayed in this episode by Deadliest Warrior alumni Fahim Fazli, who you might recognize as one of the experts in the Taliban episode, season 1.
Natural fit, really.
Just wanted to come back for more. Just
hopefully they gave him a fat paycheck, because he does a pretty great job at playing like the Looney Tunes version of Saddam.
Like the Saddam that's in the reenactment is like the wackiest dude who's been in the sim yet.
I want to recognize too that Dorian is giving. He says, "Let me give you the tale of the tape about Saddam Hussein."
It's like HBO boxing.
Yeah.
For our Pol Pot stats, we have age 50, height 5'9", 194 pounds, Reign of Terror 1975 to 1979. So Pol Pot's Reign of Terror ending the same year that Saddam Hussein's is beginning.
And that's interesting connect. I will say too, it's a weird disconnect with the ages, because the actor they get to play Pol Pot looks 17.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was kind of shocked when I saw they were both age 50 for this, because, like you said, that Pol Pot, he's like 20 years.
Yeah, when we were watching the reenactment together, I always do this when I watch it. I had to ask you, like, is that supposed to be Pol Pot?
Yeah. It took me a couple minutes to figure out like which one he was in that like, group.
Yeah. And of course, the last stat we get, actually pretty important to the overall episode, is that the average age of your Khmer Rouge soldier is 16 years old, and the average age of your Republican Guard soldier is 25. So
I will say, I did just Google this. Sorry, burp.
leave it in.
Google says the average age is 17. So Google, a little disputing.
Okay.
And also, a little fun fact, according to Reddit, the average life expectancy during Pol Pot's regime was 18.91 years old.
Jesus Christ.
Which is crazy.
Hitting them big stats. So
they should have had one of the stats be average life expectancy of the population.
To further intro these warriors, they bring up a couple points. We get Robert Daly gives us one of his patented absolutelys, as he agrees with Dorian about the importance of psychological health in this matchup. A couple episodes from this, we'll get Ivan the Terrible versus Hernan Cortez, which is another episode that greatly stresses this concept of psychological health. I gotta ask, maybe rhetorical, unless any of you have anything to actually say, how much does this actually affect a 5-on-5 gunfight?
X factors?
Massively.
Yeah, like if somebody's a complete douche or not.
So I'm gonna, if I had to guess, I would say about 20%.
Good point. That's a great point, Craig. That clears it up. So there's also a couple mentions about this being a conventional group, the Republican Guard, versus a guerrilla group in the Khmer Rouge. Perhaps what makes the IRA versus Taliban matchup a little more interesting for us than this or the Viet Cong episode is that it's guerrilla versus guerrilla. That's IRA versus Taliban. In the world of Deadliest Warrior, where it's 5-on-5 and terrain means nothing, where it's a fight to the death and there's a serious limit on how strategy can actually be employed, we see time and again on this show that the conventional faction typically gets the win.
Right.
So they've talked about mental health. Lucas, I'm going to kick it over to Lucas's medical coroner.
We do a little scroll in here.
Can you tell us about the mental health of both of these warriors, as well as the physical health of the warriors themselves and their henchmen?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what it is with these medical studies. Whenever you find them regarding mental health, they want you to just fucking pay money for them, and I'm not going to do that. So I didn't find too much on mental health. I mean, they're both tyrant leaders of like terrible regimes.
You could probably get your degree in psychology just by analyzing these two guys.
Quote from Dorian.
You could say a lot about,
Dorkian.
you could say a lot about Saddam's like actual mental health from like his early life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I did touch a little bit on some of his history, but let me slap you with some physical.
Yeah.
With history a lot.
He suffered from chronic prostate infections.
Is it
Dude,
Saddam?
Was he
Yes,
hanging up the butt?
Yeah.
Allegedly.
Then in 2004, this was like a very big debate. This is more on like the law side of it, but the U administration, many deemed them wrong to broadcast the images of Saddam Hussein undergoing medical examination, probably finger up the butt. And they chose to do this because this was the only footage they had to release to the public to prove that he was actually arrested. But under Article 3C of the Geneva Convention, it prohibits outrageous like releases of that go against your personal dignity, including humiliation and degrading treatment, which we'd never do.
Right, yes.
Article 13 also states that prisoner of wars must be protected against insults and public curiosity, so I guess you can't call him a little bitch. His biggest fear when he was in U.S. captivity was not catching AIDS, as it was, quote, a young person disease.
That's number one on his list of priorities.
That's what makes me feel so old is all these kids these days, they're walking around making TikToks about how great their AIDS are. And I'm just sitting here like, fuck, I don't have AIDS. I have nobody to give me AIDS. Like, how do I get on this? Am I too old? Is that the problem?
Yeah.
Do I need to resign myself to like, I don't know, what's an old disease, Scott? Like tuberculosis?
Polio?
Yeah, polio. Is that what I have to do? Like a boomer disease?
Making a comeback.
Yeah.
I did tell you guys I had to make these notes at like 6 a.m. this morning, so I wasn't about to dive into some expensive medical journals for this one.
Did you actually?
Dude's insane.
Did you look up what Dorian says at the end, where it's like he's a class 4 DSM sociopath? He gives some weird classification.
No, but I'll do some live research on that while we're sitting here.
I forget what he says.
You want me to tell you about Pol Pot at all?
The DSM, that's like the medical.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like it's like the journal, like the textbook for
Psychological health stuff.
right. So he's like a class 4 sociopath on that text. But
So Pol Pot, there was a lot of speculation, I guess, about his mental health. But I mean, dude lived in Cambodia. They don't during this time period, especially, they did not have like the greatest medical facilities or anything. So there's not too much information on like his mental health or anything.
I'm sure the Khmer Rouge didn't care to keep records around.
We'll probably cover during his history that how he dies, it's from a heart attack. The result of a heart condition and serious respiratory problems that he suffered pretty much near the end of his life. He had a lot of trouble breathing. In 1987 newspaper articles, I had to pay access to these. They had, a medical assessment of like all the diseases and everything wrong with them, but I'm not going to pay for it. So.
Right, yeah. Yellow fever, the tuberculosis, the polio, all the old people diseases.
Yeah.
He was 50.
He lived in like a jungle too, and probably not in the greatest. I mean, he probably had more money, but probably didn't live in the greatest conditions. So,
Yeah.
He's probably a sick dude in more ways than one.
Sick. Definitely a sick guy. Well, let's kick it over to Matt's movie corner before we get into the experts in history. So, just a quick tangent for in case
you gotta push the button on the VCR.
in case you're looking for some companion pieces to go with this episode and this podcast. First thing I have to recommend is the movie First They Killed My Father, which is a film that came out on Netflix in 2017 and is based on a book by the same name. Written by a Cambodian genocide survivor, Lawang Ung.
Is that what you had on the TV when I walked in?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought so.
So Lawang Ung visited our high school when we were in 10th or 11th grade, Scott?
Yeah.
So that's who you were referencing, and some of us might still be friends with her on Facebook. You never know.
Yeah. Readers.
Did she agree? Did you reach out to her? Did she agree to come on?
No.
It's for the best.
Unlike
she doesn't even know this exists.
Yeah, unlike Deadliest Warrior, I didn't want her to know this exists. I was curious because I knew about Lawang Ung, and the guy they bring on the show his last name is Ong. And so I wondered if they were perhaps related. They're not. It's just a common surname in that region.
Her story is pretty crazy. I remember reading most of that book, and it's one of those. I think we actually had someone in class faint from reading the book in class. So,
it's not
heavy stuff.
It's not too long of a story if you're interested in it. It is worth the read, but I know you kids watching with your TikTok and your AIDS. You don't have the time to read a book. The Netflix movie is not a documentary. It's like a dramatization, like film. So it's only 2 hours. So, you can give that a watch as a great companion piece for this episode. There's also a 1984 movie called The Killing Fields, which is about a journalist who gets trapped in Cambodia during Pol Pot's Year Zero campaign. I didn't get a chance to watch it, but it has decent critical reviews, so I thought I'd mention it. For Saddam, I have to mention the TV show South Park had a long-running parody of Saddam that started with the 1999 South Park movie Bigger, Longer, Uncut, where Saddam is the gay boyfriend to Satan. That Satan, yes.
I want to say, too, this may not come out, might come out a little awkward, but if you think about, that came out like, 2000, just rounded to 20 years ago. If something came out, like say kids today watching that was when our age when we watched it, we were like kids. That would be the equivalent to us seeing something from like the early 1980s. Like that's how fucking old that is.
Yeah, that's wild.
Hold up. So I had to Google it if Saddam ever watched that movie because it came out when he was still alive. During his captivity, U.S. Marines forced Saddam, who was executed in 2006, to repeatedly watch the movie South Park, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut, which shows him as gay.
Hey, way to steal my thunder. This
were you going to do that
This
next?
isn't Lucas's movie corner, right? But yes, no, that is true. He was forced. That's kind of why I added it on here, because he was forced to watch it before his execution. I wonder what he thought of it.
Yeah, I would love to know.
He was like a little offensive in parts, but all right,
It was pretty funny.
He's in the
Last
cell.
words.
Hey, I don't sound like that.
Hey, I don't sound like that.
There's also a pretty decent 2008 miniseries. God damn. There's a pretty decent 2008 miniseries called House of Saddam, which is 3 parts, each about an hour. It's currently available on HBO Max. It's a dramatization of like his life, essentially, his family. I'd also like to mention a podcast that I mentioned in Rangers vs. North Koreans called Blowback. So in season 1 of this podcast, they cover the lead up to the U.S. war in Iraq. And much of that includes Saddam's rise to power, the Iran-Iraq war, the first Gulf War, the second Gulf War, and Saddam's capture and execution. So it's an entertaining podcast, maybe not as good as some, but second best podcast out there for this topic. And I would just like to add, there's a lot that I didn't cover here. There's like to put it in technical terms, a shit zillion movies and documentaries about these guys. So, if you want more, go seek it out. But those are my recommendations.
That's how their history was too, trying to narrow it down to some key points where it's there's millions and millions of books and documents and everything.
I would say the majority of stuff you'll find on Saddam, and it's probably for a good reason, but the majority of stuff you'll find on Saddam Hussein gravitates towards like documentaries.
Yeah.
Because they're not trying to glorify...
Nope.
Speaking of documentaries, I got to throw this in here. This is Severe Clear. This is a documentary. It is not rated. I recommended Restrepo. That one I said was like, it's like, this one's really unrated. It is like real war footage that was
Kind of a dumb name.
Severe Clear.
Yeah.
This movie.
Can you read
this
it?
movie's great. I think it's like, honestly, I would say it's like a mix between The Hurt Locker and meets Paranormal Activity.
That is the dumbest quote ever.
Lucas came in suggesting this movie, and Dan picks it up and goes, "The Hurt Locker meets Paranormal Activity."
I have no idea where that even comes from because this is like real
It's the quote on
documentary
the front of the
footage.
It's like equivalent of like Skyrim, but with guns.
Yes.
So what is this about? Because you can't tell from the title at all.
It's like the Dark Souls of documentaries,
This is firsthand footage of whenever the U.S. Marine Corps invaded Baghdad. This is of the invasion of Baghdad and like the entire like campaign leading up to that. And it's all real footage. It's very disturbing.
I want to say too, just to add, that's not the whole quote. It says,
But it's a good watch.
Extraordinary, like The Hurt Locker meets Paranormal Activity, only it's real.
Where do they get the paranormal activity from?
Real?
Yeah, right. Yeah, are you telling me Paranormal Activity wasn't real? What the hell?
That's a crazy quote.
Mind blown.
Where in that movie is there a ghost?
So they intercut the experts with history here, so I'm going to do the same thing. They introduced the Saddam experts. We got Sabah Kodad, who they bill as a former Iraqi general. The show states that while in service as an Iraqi general, he refused to shell an innocent Iraqi village in 1996. As a result, the Ba'ath Party had him arrested. After getting out of prison, he eventually escaped all the way to the U.S. and helped U.S. forces discover Saddam in 2003. And it really stuck out to me where they were like, he gets out of prison and then he's in the U.S. And it felt like in Dark Knight Rises, where Bruce Wayne goes from climbing out of the pit in the middle of nowhere, and then the next scene he's just in Gotham City. And it's like, I feel like they left some important stuff out. So Sabah was actually a captain in the Republican Guard. So incredibly funny that they list him as Iraqi general multiple times. Captain in the Republican Guard. I could not find much. So you can find a ton about this guy, and that's almost a problem. There's a lot of like PBS interviews with him and articles written about this guy. I couldn't find much about his story of like, nobly being arrested or whatever. So what I did find is that Sabah worked at an Iraqi base near Baghdad called Salman Pak. And when he defected, it was a whole bunch of guys from this facility that defected at the same time. He provided accounts to U.S. intelligence and like U.S. media that Salman Pak was used as an Al-Qaeda training facility. Salman Pak was also identified by the U.S. intelligence to be a key facility in the Iraqi chemical weapons program. Ooh. However, years later, after the invasion, the dust has settled. No evidence has been found to support any of Sabah or his fellow defectors' claims. So one might read this in a cynical fashion that Sabah served Saddam while it was convenient and then saw the writing on the wall and decided, I got to get out of here, fed the U.S. intelligence what they wanted to hear, and got a free pass. So I remember, Lucas, when you were watching this, you saw Sabah come on and you're like, why the hell is this guy not in jail? Former Saddam guy?
So wait, not to put words in your mouth, but are you suggesting that his story about not shelling the village is like fake? Maybe.
I honestly can't make that claim because I didn't find anything about it.
I couldn't.
Well, sorry, I was talking about the bit about nothing to support. Is that what they're talking about?
No, they're talking about his claims. So the biggest thing he's known for is that he gave a lot of accounts to American intelligence and the media that this Salman Pak facility he worked at was a training camp for Al-Qaeda.
Okay.
And you can see quotes that he gives saying he witnessed them practicing chemical weapons tests, hijacking airplanes, like training for that.
All the buzzwords.
And of course, none of it came out to be true. We rocked Saddam's shit. We went to Salman Pak, and there was no evidence that anything like that happened there. So I don't know about the chemical shelling story. I'm assuming that's true. I didn't see anything counterfactual to that, but one might read that he definitely lied in order to get asylum out of state when he saw the writing on the wall.
If you read into it a little bit too, maybe he had his he turned from his heel turn or whatever, where he turned into like the good guy again. But
that's the non-cynical way to read it.
If he was a general in his army, you don't get there by just
I was gonna say
playing around.
What happened before
stones.
that point is
so
conveniently lost to memory.
Little sketchy in my opinion. I don't know what Sabah's up to today because I just didn't bother, but there's all you need to know about Captain Kodad. Next up is our absolute Chad, Calvin Bondley, who's
Deadliest heartthrob.
labeled as a Saddam weapons specialist. The show states he faced combat with insurgents in Iraq. So Calvin has a Wikipedia that reads like it was written by himself or an agent. He describes himself as an up-and-coming actor, fitness trainer, entrepreneur, and genocide survivor, which I'm assuming is what they're talking about when they say he faced insurgents in Iraq.
I would say it's a crime that he was not featured on the Aftermath.
Yes. So the real treasure trove, however, for you fans out there, is his Instagram.
Dude, I looked through it.
You can easily find by Googling his name. You could just pull it up right now, Craig. It brings me great pleasure to confirm that Calvin still has the body, face, and hair of an absolute Chad.
He looks like a Khal Drogo cosplayer.
Yeah.
To be a comic
When they do the weapons test later where it's like Jonathan versus Calvin, nothing against Jonathan, but I was like the Chad Republican Guard versus the Virgin Chimera Root.
Oh my god, look at his profile.
I know.
I described it as hyper Chad. Scroll down. It's all like luxury flexing pictures where he's like smoking a cigar in front of a private jet and like.
And look, and he posts shit like, like. Those photos.
Dude, come on the pod. I want to meet this guy.
He's got some Chad energy going. It's wild.
He's like hyper Chad
Hey,
level.
Craig, can you go back and look at his bio on Instagram because
I'll read it.
interesting. Yeah, so it's I can't tell what flag that is.
That's Sweden, it looks like.
So I'm sorry, but
it's bigger up
it
there.
says like Sweden to America. Sorry if I'm wrong about that flag.
Matt, can you put on the fan?
Yeah, you got. He lives in Los Angeles, born on Doomsday, genocide survivor and Viking warrior.
I think the genocide survived him.
Yeah, hell.
What does born on Doomsday mean?
So this is typical.
Oh my god, I'm looking at his story. Hold on.
Oh,
Damn.
He looks like Gilgamesh.
Please like screenshot
he
that
does
so we
look
can
like
put that up.
Civ 6 Gilgamesh.
Yeah.
If you have Instagram, give this man a follow. You'll get some serious entertainment. He's got like the Sigma male grind set thing kind of going on. But it's really
Oh my
Oh god, you gotta screenshot that. Oh my god.
the treasure.
Someone please describe what is happening.
I'm
Yes.
screenshotting these. I'm going on.
Wait, can you screen record just like his whole story?
Okay,
So-
maybe this will be a longer pod episode.
Yeah.
So Craig just showed us a video from Calvin's story that's posted right now.
Can we even show that
where
on YouTube?
He's fingering a baked potato.
A loaded baked potato.
And he captioned it, "She's creaming." What the fuck?
All right, I got at least the screen cap for right now. You get the message out of that.
We're never moving on from Calvin.
Look at his fan. Look at
Dude, come on the pod, please.
Dude.
I want to meet this guy so bad now.
Swag at 100,000. Okay.
He looks like if DJ Khaled was like ripped.
So Calvin, while he as an individual is really interesting and entertaining to look up,
Craig, you need to put that away.
he is the type of war expert where anytime you see like X weapon specialist, in this case it's Saddam weapon specialist, it's going to be a stunt actor. Calvin is just an actor. I don't know what genocide he dealt with or whatever.
Here's a
He's
plot
originally
twist.
from Iraq, but
That was actually the Insta page for Sabah Kadada.
I like to think for that potato, he was in like a high-end like luxury restaurant and he's like just fingering his potato on the table.
So, but what I can say is Calvin does a decent job on the episode. He gives us some memes, and Craig described him as having like Super Saiyan hair. He's got like the best hair of the pod.
Craig's still looking at his
I know.
his eyebrows are crazy. I'm just making sure I get his story before I forget.
Craig's gonna be distracted the rest of the app.
Something awoken in Craig.
I'm gonna move on.
Please.
The final Saddam expert is Lieutenant Colonel Rick Francona, who's a retired U.S. Air Force and CIA agent. So he worked for U.S. Air Force Intelligence and then CIA. The show states he served as General Norman Schwarzkopf's advisor in the first Gulf War. A lot can be found about Rick pretty easily. He's an author of multiple books about like his service, and everything the show claims seem to check out. So you can find a ton about him. He's done interviews. He's got a wiki page. So he's legit. And he acts as like translator on this episode for former not General Sabakatat, former captain. Then the show cuts to some history. So first we get Mr. Rick Francona tells us a story about Saddam attempting to assassinate the president of Iraq. The show goes on to add that the assassination attempt made him a legend, that is Saddam, and helped him rise through the ranks of the Ba'ath Party, eventually becoming president himself. The show mentions briefly the Iran-Iraq War and Saddam using chemical weapons on Iraqi ethnic Kurds, who he considered rebels for aligning with Iran. Rick claims that the Iraqis are the only people in the world to have used nerve gas on the battlefield. I researched this one myself. It's probably not true, but I do understand where he's coming from. There's a big difference in like what could have been deployed during the various world wars. There was a number of chemical weapons versus like what officially goes on the record.
Yeah. It's probably after we made that treaty. What do they call, like Geneva Convention or whatever? Where
it's specifically referring to a certain nerve agent is what he's referring to. Unfortunately, it's no longer the official time that it's only been used. That nerve agent has been deployed in the Syrian conflict and multiple others since then. Lucas and Dan, can you tell us about the history of Saddam Hussein, the Ba'ath Party, and some of the key moments during his reign of terror?
I can definitely cover some personal history on Saddam if you want, and I love that the show uses the example of that assassination attempt on the president, because in reality it's true that Saddam used that as like a point of pride and like his defining moment, but it was like a total embarrassing failure.
Yeah, he botched it like real bad.
The story I love about it is when they were planning the hit, they had 4 guys as part of the assassination attempt. So what does Saddam think? He's like, oh, if we have 2 guys on this side and 2 guys on this side, there's no way we can miss the car. That guy's going to get hosed with bullets. And they don't understand that bullets go through cars.
Right. And not every bullet is hitting the car. Some are going to go across the street.
Saddam was wounded in the assassination attempt by being shot by his own crony from across the street.
That sounds like a plan. It's like, all right, this is going to be foolproof. It's on the other side.
I'm kind of upset they didn't mention that.
There's
That's
also
how he got shot.
There's also reports that it was Saddam who ruined it also because he prematurely fired. We've all been there.
He
That's
blew,
her problem.
Yeah. I'll avoid the he shot too early, and then he did botch the assassination attempt himself and get shot in the process. So
well, the show makes it look way more heroic, where he's like he's like shooting the guy and then he goes, oh, I got shot in the leg. Oh, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, it's not that at all.
After this moment, he went into hiding, and it wasn't until after he attended some school in Egypt, I believe, where he returned as like a official in the Ba'ath Party, and that's like he slowly climbed the ranks through there, a little bit more calculated than his, previous attempts. I think the psychological profile before that, like his childhood, is important to go through because that's probably where he got so fucked up.
Go for it.
He was born in Al Ajwa village, which is like a northern region of Iraq, I believe. His mother blamed his birth on like the death of her husband. Or I think he died before that, and she just thought of Saddam as like an ill omen for the family.
Yeah, his brother and dad died of cancer, they suspected, right before he was born.
The name Saddam means like the confrontational one, like the confronter, or like...
Wow.
Yeah.
That's kind of sick, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, like...
That's a cool name.
That gives you an idea of like the kind of family life he's going to be going into. So obviously he has like a very troubled home life. His stepfather's very abusive.
I do got to point this into his mom was so depressed she attempted to abort the pregnancy, so he almost wasn't born, and then she tried to commit suicide after he was born.
Yeah, and like it failed. Obviously, he was born anyway, so that was obviously like a very resentful, damaging scenario for a child to grow up in. So Saddam Hussein had a stepfather who was very abusive also. His first gift from his stepfather was a pistol, which kind of fits, what we know about his personality. He was very violent as a child, and it's said that he killed his first person before he was even a teenager. Like he would always go into class and like threaten his teachers with that pistol.
God.
Yeah, really like while all this is happening still, like when I picture these events in my head, I picture the South Park puppet still.
Yeah. You know,
But-
it's funny, like just thinking like at that age, he like little Saddam got on Xbox and was like, "You guys want to go like kill someone this weekend?" Yeah, I'll do it. I got nothing else going on.
The reason I do bring this up is because it relates to his psychological like profile that they bring up, like his damaged mind growing up. But also his uncle in this time was like his only source of like paternal comfort, really, like his only family. But he was like a raging anti-Semitic. Like he wrote books that I won't even say the title on this podcast because they're just insanely fucking racist. Just growing up with that total cancer, toxic ideology growing up, and that's really why he fit in so well, like going into the bath party, kind of bad people, you know? So after that assassination attempt, he goes into hiding, comes back, slowly rises to power. He was the deputy of the bath party for a long time, and that's where he actually started finding like some success along the lines. Until he overthrew the president of that party by saying, "If you don't step down and give me power, I will kill you."
It's kind of ironic. The leader of the bath party is so dirty.
I know. Lucas, going up to this point, do you have anything
Right,
to add?
can we get the
Early life?
Brendan, do you have the little sting for the Pretty Good Podcast? The ba-dum-bum?
Yeah, Saddam.
Hold on.
Oh, did it play? We'll just have to trust you. We'll just have to trust you that it played. Okay.
Just to further his anger, before he threatened the leader, they essentially held him in jail. But because he fled to Egypt the first time in Syria because of that failed assassination. And the second time that he was getting, they were coming after him, he was like, "I'm not even going to run this time. You could just arrest me because I know you won't kill me." And then they put him in jail for 2 years. So that like furthered his anger.
Yeah, he has a very famous like trial. I can't even call it a trial. They're in like Parliament or whatever their version of Parliament is, but it was 1979. Yeah, that was like his full rise to power. He had everyone in this room, and he said like, "Some of you among us are traitors." And
68 people.
68 people. This is like their official government. He's literally just sitting up on the podium smoking a cigar, reading off names, and as he reads off these names, he brings them out back, and they either go to prison or he shoots them.
And he insisted that this meeting was videotaped also. And so somewhere out there, there's like footage of this,
Allegedly.
awful video.
Yeah.
But he consolidates power through that, executes like 30 something people in that event alone. So that kind of tells you what you're working with there. Saddam Hussein has like this weird relationship with the people of Iraq where he did some strangely like progressive things. Like he gave everyone like a really good healthcare system, built like many construction projects, gave them their jabs, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It was a sort of dictatorship where if you stay in line, don't talk shit, like you can have a decent life, but at the same time you have that identity crisis of like what is this all worth?
Yeah, where that
Not
stems
having a
from.
voice.
So in June 1st, 1972 is whenever he saw the seizure of the international oil interests in Iraq. And then whenever the 73 energy crisis hit, revenues received from oil skyrocketed. So that's when the country became rich. And he had this idea of we're going to modernize Iraq a lot. And so that's why he built up like a lot of the infrastructure and did all that stuff. So there's, it helped some people, I guess,
Yeah.
but like it brought Iraq like a lot farther along in modernization.
Yeah, nationalizing like the oil industry was like his main source of income during this period. That all kind of meant nothing though when he started war with Iran.
Yeah.
Iran, they had a troubled border always, but like during Saddam started the war pretty much just to like build his rep. Like he just wanted like he saw himself. I'm not sure if you saw this.
I know that he became the United States, like Saddam, during that war. We supported him.
They did until he formed a 15-year treaty with the Soviet Union too, and that's where the relations with the U.S. got a little shaky.
Yeah, you got to understand that while this is happening, like this is also like the peak animosity between the U.S. and Iran.
Yeah,
like the hostage crisis, all that other crap, like.
All that other crap. You guys know.
Did you read that from a history dissertation? All that other reference line.
In the sense, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But the war started. Saddam, at this point in time, I'm not sure if you saw this. He wanted to view himself as like the second Nebuchadnezzar.
They mentioned that in the episode.
Okay, okay.
He's trying to rebuild the Babylonian Empire.
Yeah.
Right, that's how.
Nebuchadnezzar Scrooge.
No. The ship in the Matrix, the Nebuchadnezzar. It's named after. Yeah.
But again, that's how this man sees himself. He sees himself as like a deity almost. Total hypocrite too. He wanted to view himself as like the devout Muslim, but like, you know, he was always smoking cigars. His favorite drink was like Johnny Walker. He's on the record of that. Always watching Western movies. Like he was a huge fan of The Godfather.
Well, you know, that part of the book doesn't count.
It's always interesting when you get these like crazy people and you learn like that some aspect of them is just like normal.
They always like our movies. I feel like they're always like, "Oh, I love American cinema."
Well,
like you're all assholes.
Very famous. I was thinking about this anime fun fact. Another Middle Eastern bad guy, fucking what's his name?
Osama bin Laden.
Yeah,
we do.
Yeah. Osama bin Laden. He, whenever I guess they arrested him, on his laptop had a bunch of like Naruto downloaded. Like he was a big Naruto fan, which is like
I think that says
like
more about
how do
the
you go
Naruto
from playing
community.
9/11 to Naruto?
So that's important to mention, Craig, because season 4, I think we would have had Adolf Hitler versus Osama bin Laden. Correct?
Yeah.
You want to continue, Dan?
Right.
Just a little
So
more?
the Iran-Iraq War was like hundreds of thousands of people died on both sides, like huge casualties, not a single inch of territory gained or lost, really.
Glad we don't do that kind of stuff anymore.
I know. Could you imagine?
Dan, I'm the history guy. I got a pee, so just keep talking. I'll be
Okay.
back.
But his reputation was like, I mean, it's hard to figure out where the Iraqi people would stand in a situation like this, because what are you going to do? Like go on the news and say, I disagree. No, you're dead.
Right.
So on paper, his reputation was pretty undamaged by the Iran-Iraq war. So he actually kind of spun it as like a win because of his propaganda machine. That's where he built like his famous Scud mosque. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
He has like a bizarre mosque that he had built where like the pillars of it are like Scud missiles.
Jesus.
You should Google it. It's pretty weird.
That might be against his religion. I'm not sure though.
Yeah.
But Mr. Devout.
Not his interpretation of it, I suppose.
He had a famous Quran copy commission written in his own blood.
Yeah.
But it was not probably his own blood. Plot twist.
Was it syrupy and attracted bees?
Yeah.
It was like the that pen in Harry Potter.
Yeah. That's another weird example you could look up. There's a lot of people that like try to figure out what the hell was going on there, but it's just a fun tidbit.
Yeah. Dan, tell us about the first Gulf War.
We'll get there. I do want to like hold off because
Okay.
the Iran-Iraq war is where he felt empowered to use like chemical weapons.
Yeah.
And I know there is like some ambiguity there, but there's like very strong evidence that he used chemical weapons against his own people. I don't want to like.
So what's the deal? Because I hear about the Kurds all the time in Iraq. You know, why are they always getting hate from like the Iraqi government?
The Kurds they've always been their own separate like ethnic group.
Yeah.
They've never been seen as like, maybe not Iraqis, but like they've always seen themselves as their own thing. And a dictator who wants absolute power and control might not like the idea of a people seeing them as separate from the state.
I do know one super based thing about the Kurds is that you know, in modern times,
The cheese.
they're like the #1 killers of ISIS and stuff like
Yeah.
that. They're soldiers are fighting them, so they can't all be bad. You
They
know,
have their own language, I think.
yeah,
Is it
Kurdish.
It's their own
And they
whole
call-
ethnic identity.
And I think they call their region Kurdistan.
Yeah.
So, you know.
And they're still kicking. They're
Yeah.
doing good. Saddam's not.
Right.
But Kurdistan was always like kind of a thorn in Saddam's side. So he always felt it's really fucked up too. After his initial chemical attack, he never really felt the need to do it again. So what he would do is just airdrop flour, like food flour on them to make them think that they're being chemically
Antique
attacked.
them like from
Oh
Jackass.
my God.
Super fucked up shit.
Yeah.
So he would airdrop flour to make them think that they're getting like gassed again, but it wasn't actually like the mind of a psychopath.
That's kind of fun.
Yeah.
In a very fucked up way, it's kind of funny. Just like,
Well, you know, the lens of history.
Yeah.
just think about that moment when someone made the decision. They're like, someone's like, "We're out of chemical weapons," and he's just
I'm sorry to take so long.
"What if we use flour?"
I'm sorry to take so long on this. I'll speed it up though, but
do as much as you want about the history
Yeah.
here.
it's important because this war with Iran is where he lost all his money. Like he had this huge oil boom and then he just spent it all on a pointless World War I in the Middle East. Lost all his money, so he needs something new to like scrap up some cash. That's where we get the invasion of Kuwait from. So a big misstep on his part was thinking that, like, again, we talked about how he's sort of seen as like the good guy over there for a little bit. He's at least not a thorn in the U.S.'s side until now. He bet wrong that the U.S. would intervene in the invasion of Kuwait. He thought that they would. He felt betrayed.
Yeah.
That's like his opinion on the matter. Like, oh, I can't believe they backstabbed me. But that's where we get Desert Storm from.
Yeah.
If you look up historical documentaries on Desert Storm, it is wild how bad we dunk on them.
Yeah. My fun fact: my dad served in Desert Storm, and he was actually he was scheduled to be stationed in Italy to do like a tour of service in Italy. And then Saddam invaded Kuwait, and so I just remember my dad's personal opinion was like, "God damn it!" He's like, I could have lived a few years in Italy. It would have been awesome. My mom was more pissed about it too. She was like, "I could have lived there," and instead my dad had to go to like,
Please
the desert.
If you're interested in the topic, please fact check me. But I think the coalition forces lost less than like 100 people total during the entire little escapade, all that other crap. I think the Iraqis lost around 30,000. I might be undershooting that even. The ratio is insane.
It was a steamrolling.
Yeah. That's like playing Ruse on the easiest difficulty and you just have like super heavy tanks out the wahoo. Like completely nuts like ratio.
Yeah, it was like practically like sending Leon S. Kennedy in, where you
Goddamn.
taking out like 10,000 Ganados.
But much like the Iran-Iraq war, Saddam, he retreats, he goes back to Iraq. He somehow still spins this as like a win. Like we stood up to the forces of the West.
He called it a win. He bragged because they didn't kill me.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, just to guess, like, judging by what you've told me about this guy's personality, his mind is incapable of even processing that he takes an L. Like, anything that happens to him, he has to process it as like, it was actually like, we did pretty good.
Yeah, he claimed that they won because he didn't die.
Yeah.
So,
And also, who's going to question him?
Right.
You know, if you're in his inner circle and you're like, actually, we lost. Yeah, exactly.
Again, that complete control is how he keeps spinning this as a win. However, at this point in time, he's severely sanctioned by the rest of the world. He no longer has any allies, no matter what your perspective on Iran is.
yeah, the UN kind of has him by the balls, and they're allowed to come in and inspect like the deconstruction of any chemical warfare, weapons of mass destruction, suspected sites, and oversee it. And
Yeah, and then at this point, we could fast forward to 9/11. George Bush cites Iraq as this axis of evil.
Yeah, we mentioned that in our North Korean episode. That is it North Korea, Iran, and Iraq are the axis of evil.
Yep. So that's the motive. That's the motive for us to invade. Ugh, God, that Yingling.
Yeah.
That Western PA taste.
Yeah.
That river water.
Infamously,
Again, great.
infamously, we invade Iraq on bad intel. The you know the thoughts well-meaning.
Thank you, Sabah.
Yeah.
How about his capture and execution?
Well, before we do that, there is on February 24th, 2003, he did a very famous interview with CBS News reporter Dan Rather, where he denied possessing any weapons of mass destruction. But it's kind of like a snapshot out of history. This weird interview. It was the first time anyone from the United States had interviewed him in a couple decades, I think.
Yeah. The capture, Lucas, do you have any details specifically about the capture? Because I know a lot about his trial, but not necessarily the operation that captured him.
Not too much. If you want to know about it, this documentary pretty much covers a lot of it. But there's
I thought that was more like paranormal stuff.
Yeah. But there's that very symbolic video of his statue toppling. After we took Baghdad, his whereabouts remained in question for weeks, but he was on the U.S. Most Wanted list. It was December 13th, 2003, in Operation Red Dawn. Saddam was captured after being found hiding in a hole near a farmhouse in Adwar. I'm not sure where that is. You can find it on a map.
Pretty close to his hometown.
And then June 30th, 2004 is whenever we start getting to his trial.
Yeah, so his trial was infamously kind of a shit show. I strongly believe that anyone, no matter what you've done, deserves a fair trial. But if I had to compromise on anyone on the planet, it'd probably be Saddam Hussein. It was just a mess to organize, and there was a lot of resistance from the person in question. Saddam would always make a show of it. He would always object to the judge.
Object to AIDS.
Object to AIDS. But regardless, they worked through the logistical issues of making this trial, investigating his war crimes, everything else, and he was executed in 2006. Notably, he was monologuing when they pulled the rope. He was trying to get out a last statement, and the guy, I guess, was just fuck this.
Yeah, I read that his last words obviously were in Arabic, but it was God is great, and Palestine will, achieve victory over Israel.
If you do watch the trial and the execution, there is a point, a kind of surreal point, where you do see in Saddam okay, I'm not getting out of this one, I'm dead.
Yeah.
He notably wanted to be killed by a firing squad, but it was denied because he thought it would be, I don't know, I imagine quicker than hanging. But there is
more cool.
There's phone videos and everything else of it. It's probably pretty awful footage. I did not look at it, but I did read that there is footage of the actual execution.
Yeah, his last little snub is he denied his own last meal. He didn't accept it. But when he was being rushed out to the rope, he was getting heckled, and it was not a pretty sight.
Yeah. Well, interesting. Anything about Iraqi post Saddam's death?
No, the story ends there, and goodbye.
Yeah. And I end where Deadliest Warrior ends.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I will say probably,
as an American, I say bye.
Yeah, probably. This thing about a lot of these dictators we hear about is, Iraq is not a unified, and obviously I'm no expert, but they're not a hegemonic culture necessarily. There's a lot of, or maybe hegemonic was the right word. I don't know. Too big of a word for me today.
We get Iraq expert placard underneath that.
Yeah. I just know there's a lot of different tribes, and one of the things that Saddam managed to do was bring all the tribes together and to stop warring. And after his death, you saw the United States try to create a government there
that's the
did
big
not
argument.
work out.
Yeah. That's the big argument you always hear. Was Iraq better before?
Yeah, and it gave rise to a lot of the civil war that's still happening there today, and groups like ISIS and stuff, who
you could have a whole debate,
argue,
but I'm not qualified for that debate.
So
Saddam killed around 250,000 of his own people.
Yeah. Well, that's enough about Satan's boyfriend. Let's get into.
I am sorry for going very long-winded, but I feel like taking extra time on these people's history and their psychological upbringings we pick up where the show left off.
It might prevent future.
Yeah.
They're doing more to actually look at why they do these things.
Yeah.
in the show actually.
I think you guys are wasting time on this when we could be talking about whether the 9mm Browning has the edge over the 9mm Tokarev. It's almost like they're the same gun. So, first Pol Pot expert we get introduced to is Jonathan Kahn, who is labeled as Pol Pot weapons expert, which we know is code for actor. So the show says he is.
Does it really say Pol Pot weapons expert?
Yeah.
Like I specialize in weapons, but only those used by Pol Pot.
He's at Thanksgiving, and they're like, "So, Jonathan, what are you up to these days?" And he's like, "Yeah, so I've been really getting into Pol Pot weapons specifically." Oh, what can you tell us about him? I don't know shit about the guy, but the weapons.
Yeah.
Ever heard of the Tokarev?
Did you ever hear of the cane knife?
So he walks around with a cane.
It's actually a farm tool.
That's his everyday carry. The show says he is a former U.S. Army marksman and that the Khmer Rouge murdered his grandparents. Jonathan is an actor, writer, and general crew member on film sets. Hard to find more since there's a more famous filmmaker and actor named Jonathan Kahn. But I'm actually going to take the show's like credits at face value. He probably did serve. I don't know whether he was a marksman. That seems like something they would just fucking throw on there. He was
general.
He might have qualified.
I was gonna say it was probably just like he qualified with like the rifle, and like I mean I could say I'm a marksman because I qualified. Dan could say he's a marksman because he's like qualified in something before. So
You know, I don't know if his grandparents died in the genocide. It seems like a really awful thing to lie about. I know there are some liars on this show, but you know, it seems like an awful thing to say if it's not true. It's probably
So
true.
we just gotta. Yeah, I agree. Just take him.
I kind of just give him a pass because, you know, he's a stunt actor who clearly has some experience with firearms, and he does a decent job on the episode.
Yeah.
So he's entertaining, and then we have
Real quick, I don't know if you went over it. I was on my phone. Sorry.
Oh.
But apparently, he plays a Yakuza. Background in season 1. On his IMDb,
didn't see that.
Yeah, on his IMDb, I think he has a credit. It's
This
Yakuza
is
Boss
news
season
to
1.
me.
I didn't go back and look for him,
I
but
missed
yes,
that.
apparently he
that's awesome.
he is a actor for.
I'll
the
try to check the tape. It might be tough.
Yeah.
I missed that.
when they sign the contract, do they get one representing someone on the show and then one playing someone random in the sim?
So we got second Pol Pot expert is Kilong Ung, who is listed as a Cambodian genocide survivor. So Kilong is legit as far as I could tell. He wrote a book about his story, and he runs a foundation called Golden Leaf Education Foundation. Golden Leaf gets its name from the name of his book, where he describes himself as a helpless leaf in the wind, but eventually was able to land, take root, and grow into a beautiful tree. So
In the good old USA, right?
yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, you know, he lives today. He's got a family. He's got this foundation. He's got the book. So if you want to read more about him, you certainly
So
can.
you said he was a Cambodian genocide survivor.
Yeah. He was a child during it.
So they brought that on the show to represent the guy in charge of, you know,
Right.
what's that? I could feel the show getting out of touch.
Right. So it's another example of this episode trying to have its cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, but don't worry, we have a survivor on because, you know, this is like...
And instead that manifests as, wow, I remember that sound.
Oh my God, there are so many.
just-
There's so many moments this episode where I was like, this poor guy. Like, obviously he gets to be on Deadliest Warrior, which is cool, and he probably got a decent check cut, and he got to like plug his stuff, but it feels incredibly exploitative to have him on this episode.
Yeah.
Do you think he knew what he was getting into? Like,
I don't think he's aware. And then in the aftermath, he says some things like where he's like, the real winner of this episode, you know, are the survivors of these tragedies.
Yeah, really, it's the who loses, whoever wins.
Yeah.
He's on the show representing like the leader of the people that directly affected him, representing him like,
Yeah.
yo, that's my guy.
Yeah. Now, obviously, he's a grown adult.
That's weird.
He can make his own decisions. I'm sure he was a little.
Disclaimer.
I'm sure he was a little aware of like what was going on, but I can't help but feel for him a little bit because it does feel like he's exploited a bit on this episode. To be honest with you,
It's like having a Holocaust survivor do like that.
the
SS
Adolf
episode,
Hitler,
yeah.
the Adolf Hitler episode. Yeah, like So the show talks about Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge. The Khmer Rouge started as a group of students who took up arms against the government. Eventually, they would defeat the government and take the capital in 1975. Once in charge, Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge attempt to recreate their version of a utopia, which necessitates genocide of a large portion of the country, including the upper class and the educated. Craig and Scott, these are the show's notes. I would love for you guys to tell us the history of Pol Pot, the Khmer Rouge. Where did they come from? How did they get into power? And what was their vision of a utopia? And how were they deposed?
What's going on, guys? Real quick, I just want to issue a formal apology. I know I promised at the end of the last episode I would have a Pol Pot story. I legitimately have no idea what I was referring to. It might have been the Lao Ong book that we read in high school, but it's not really about Pol Pot. This would have been where I inserted the story, but I really don't know what I was referring to. So I apologize for anybody who I disappointed.
A lot of questions there.
Sure, I'll attempt to cover all those.
Give us everything you got.
I will say there's a funny moment, minor compared to the first embarrassment of the beginning where they're defending the concept of the episode. But Mac describes the Khmer Rouge's mission, and he's like, they want to recreate, or Pol Pot wants to recreate Cambodia in his own image. And then Dorian just goes, oh.
This is his plan. I'm going to kill off anyone who knows anything about the past. Hey, you've read a book? You're dead. You're an intellectual? You're dead. You wear glasses? You're dead.
He's like, oh. Anyway, so that was funny. I want to give a quick shout out to a channel called The Infographics Show, which I think
watch them a lot. Yeah,
did a great job of, I think, putting it all in a nice, snappy 10-minute video.
Like a digestible format.
Yeah, and that's where I got a lot of the
they do that. And they always have little cartoons and stuff to just show you on the screen what's going on, for your child brain that needs something.
Cartoon Pol Pot. So some research. Just before we even get to his origins, he murdered practically a quarter of the country's population, which is crazy. His real name was Saloth Sar. So Pol Pot is not his given name. It's something he adopted. He was born...
That sounds uncomfortably Star Wars.
But yeah. Both alliterations.
Yeah. He was, I don't know. He was crafty, I guess. So we'll actually get to the origins of Pol Pot, which it's kind of funny. So he was born to a wealthy family, well off, and that owned a lot of land. Later in life, he would try to pretend actually like he came from a poor family to support his regime's ideals, which we'll get into. Kind of opposite of Saddam, really, where Saddam came from a very broken home.
Yeah.
He came from
it's
a
like he's always got that chip on his shoulder.
He's like the reverse hypocrite.
Right, yeah.
Pol Pot is like the rich guy that goes to college and then comes home and he's like, hey man, I'm not getting a job. That's for the that's
corporations.
That's the corporations, brother.
Right. He was a terrible student and was attracted to Cambodian rebels who wanted Cambodia to be free from France, who was basically, I guess, colonized, maybe would be the term. At the time they had Cambodia, so he was attracted to them. He came up with the name Pol Pot, which is short for the French phrase politique potentielle, which means potential politics.
Nerd.
Yeah.
It's like sick.
Seriously, what a nerd, dude. Pol Pot didn't get bullied enough as a child.
It sounds like
the opposite of Saddam. He didn't get bullied enough.
It sounds like, in Xbox, Xbox 360, you could ask them to generate a name for you, and it was like a random adjective with a random noun.
Yeah.
It's just like, yeah, I'm a potential politics. Fucking idiot. So eventually, France left Cambodia, leaving a power vacuum. Somehow ended up being a history teacher for 7 years, despite his poor grades. But he kept his revolutionary ideas in the background. Kind of like that teacher that is like MAGA.
God damn it.
He's like, they're like, I sense a little bit of tinge in how you're telling us the history. But anyway. Eventually, in the 1960s, the government started cracking down on communist ideas, and Pot had to flee to the jungle. He allied with a group of Viet Cong to start the Khmer Rouge, who's said to be very persuasive and charismatic, which made him a successful motivator, kind of like a lot of these sociopaths or, serial killers, dictators, things like that. That's how you gain a following. A civil war and the Vietnam War radicalized the population, and many turned to the Khmer Rouge for answers. Eventually, the Rouge took over a weakened government and instilled his regime. So, it was just right time for him, and he just, went in.
Yeah,
He saw an
Do
opportunity.
you know anything about, like, I know the U.S. carpet bombings in Cambodia, like Nixon, because, we're fighting the Vietnam War at this time, and Nixon having the U.S. carpet bombing going on in Cambodia affected it a little bit, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it overall just weakened it. So
Yeah.
a weakened government or a weakened country is ready for anyone to step up and give them answers. So that had, I'm sure, a huge part to it.
Didn't they use that as like their excuse for evacuating the cities? Like, oh, the Americans are going to come bomb Phnom Penh, so we have to get everyone out, and that was their like big excuse. I'm pretty sure
It might have been because I know we evacuated like the embassy, like either like very shortly before the Khmer Rouge like rolled into Phnom Penh.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, sorry. Pol Pot wanted to take the country back to its roots as a blue-collar country, and so any of the educated needed to be eradicated. So,
Yeehaw.
I mean, yeah, so what was interesting about the Khmer Rouge is the show's kind of vague. They just say he wanted to recreate Cambodia in his own image. That's kind of vague because it's like, why? What's the point? From my understanding, this was primarily the goal is, the educated were seen as not emblematic of a true Cambodia, and so a lot of his efforts were to, I guess you could say, recreate Cambodia, so the blue-collar class was elevated.
Would that be like pretty analogous with like the Great Leap Forward?
I remember reading Wikipedia, and based on what I read on Wikipedia, the plan in quotes was the Great Leap Forward, but they called it, quote unquote, the Super Great Leap Forward, which I thought was hilarious.
Super awesome.
Yeah.
I want you to take Mao's stuff and multiply it by 3.
That's literally-
and all the Khmer Rouge are sitting there like, holy shit.
I think he did have a relationship with Mao. Like, I think
Yeah, they were allies with China, yeah.
right. Yeah, so I'm sure got a lot of that.
This
from-
isn't the Adventure Club, it's the Super Adventure Club.
Yeah. So that was interesting.
Sorry, we keep pulling. Craig gets on his line, and then we interject. And he's
I'm
just thrown off.
a few beers deep. It's taking me a little bit.
God.
So, yeah, take it back to roots. Oh, I was going to mention about, and I'll get into this when I get to what life was like a little bit for the Khmer Rouge. That's part of why they all wear that same outfit where it's like black and with the red scarf, because that was like a blue-collar farmer outfit.
I noticed that was super similar to the show's Viet Cong outfit as well. It's like they're dressed like on Deadliest Warrior. It's like they recycled the costume.
Could be.
Props line.
The evil team's always got to have like some type of red on them too.
Yeah. Yep.
That's because that was what the working class would have worn. That's what they wanted Cambodia to be. He didn't call it Cambodia. He had a different name for it. I didn't write it down because fuck
Super
that name.
Cambodia?
Yeah, Super Cambodia. So the educated were sent to labor camps, and those who stepped out of line were taken to detention centers. A particularly infamous detention center was called S21, and it was a converted high school, and only 23 people were known to have survived out of 18,000.
Jesus Christ.
So a super concentration camp, you might say. They had an official torture manual for its soldiers. The video I watched kind of went into a little bit of detail of it. I didn't like write it down, but it's like, because think about it, these are all young kids. Even if they're over 18, they're still really young. So they're like, here's how you get information out of somebody.
Yeah, Craig, that makes me want to mention that in the aftermath for the Genghis Khan episode, which was right before this one, the aftermath beforehand, they always ask the panel, who do you guys think's going to win? That's where we got the famous Johnny Lufrado zombie line. In the Genghis Khan one, someone, I forget which person it is, but they're like, who do you think would win between Saddam and Pol Pot? And the guy's like, well, Pol Pot was pretty thorough. So I was like, Jesus.
Oh my God. I don't remember that.
Yeah, which is like code for like, Saddam let some people live.
I feel like if this show went a little bit too far, we would have seen thorough as an X factor.
Yeah.
Thoroughness.
Yeah.
I'm sure that might have been a hit.
I mean,
X
we
Factor.
kind of almost get that in a way. So
Yeah.
That's fair.
X Factor segment's coming up. So in probably 3 hours.
Stay tuned.
So some outlawed things during the time of the Khmer Rouge were private property, jewelry, money, religion, gambling, reading materials, all important stuff.
I'm sure Pol Pot did none of it.
Well, he was exempt. So one of the things,
Right.
I didn't write this down.
Naturally.
What was it? It was in the detention centers, they were brought in to, I think this might have been not during his regime, but before, to potentially criticize things about Cambodian society. But Pol Pot and his direct reports were exempt. So you could come in and talk about what you didn't like about the current government, but you could not criticize him. Something like that. Go on Wikipedia,
So I think it sucks that all these people are dying, but you're great.
Yeah.
I think I don't have a problem with you, but some guys in your ranks, you know.
It's pretty much.
Maybe spare the kids.
No? Oh, okay.
Unless you don't want to,
Because I trust your judgment. Yeah. I think you're a good.
Yeah. Hey, whoa.
Yeah. On top of torture, even innocent civilians suffered from famine. So even if you weren't taken into the detention camp, your life still sucked because you didn't have any food.
Yeah.
He even had the rice fields restructured to better fit with the Khmer Rouge's coat of arms, which had they were still square, but they were not
Super squares.
they're not totally symmetrical. So
Sorry.
just to fit with that better, which probably didn't help the food situation. Eventually, North Vietnamese invaded Cambodia, took it over, and forced Pol Pot back into the jungle. Apparently, I tried to look into this. I didn't see a lot of information. Apparently, with support from the U.S. and China, Pol Pot continued to operate in the jungles of Cambodia for a decade.
Yeah, apparently they had the Khmer Rouge had a seat in the UN until the 90s or something like that.
Really?
Yeah.
Again, this was not my faction to research, but the U.S. I think had a questionable history with the Khmer Rouge.
So I think the real dumbed down version is this is high school drama. It's the U.S. doesn't like North Vietnam. Pol Pot eventually didn't like North Vietnam, so the U.S. likes the Khmer Rouge because ultimately the Soviets support Vietnam, who America also hates.
The old enemy of my enemy is my friend.
It's a bunch of that stuff.
And with the bombing campaign, I think you can trace McNamara's decisions from Vietnam into that.
And it takes until the Soviets fall or the Soviets kind of stop supporting North Vietnam before the U.S. is oh yeah, we don't fuck with the Khmer Rouge anymore.
Hold on. Our assistant is actually giving us a memo here. Let me see this. Oh, Pol Pot actually wasn't terribly bad. He was pretty bad.
Right.
But you didn't at the time. You didn't know. No one knew.
Was he super bad?
Yeah, no. So you can't blame the U.S. because who could know what was going on in Cambodia? No one could. So just want to correct that.
The CIA episode.
Yeah. Right.
It's like Iraq. How could we know?
Yeah, how could we know what would happen?
So a rogue group of Khmer Rouge soldiers did capture him and put him under house arrest until he died of unfortunately natural causes at the age of 72 in 1998.
Yeah, that's a bummer.
Yeah.
I kind of wish he had gotten killed.
Yeah, right.
In a worse way.
Yeah. Well, it wouldn't happen. Sometimes bad things don't happen to bad people.
Hand him over to Daddy Vlad.
Vlad would have put him in his place.
Yeah, hand him over to Daddy Vlad. Not a great leader himself, but goddamn, it would have been cathartic.
Also, I have a somewhat controversial statement. Do you think Saddam is the American stand-in this episode? Can we count Saddam as an American win?
He's our enemy, but he's our
yeah, we claim him.
Yeah,
Nobody can beat up my brother but me.
I like who knows if that's what's really going on in the production room. Sometimes I wonder if we put way too much thought into it.
Yeah.
Those guys are sitting in there and they're like, this would be cool. But I do get where you're
Clock
coming
out
from.
of 5.
We brought this up in the WAF and Viet Cong episode where it's they have the Germans win because America beat Germany, whereas we didn't beat the Viet Cong. So even though, if you look at history, I think this might upset some people, but I think it's pretty objectively clear that the Waffen SS is worse on more levels than the Viet Cong. But the Viet Cong's the bad guy in the episode, and they have to lose because we didn't win the war in Vietnam, whereas
It was a tie.
we did. Yeah, it was a tie. We did kick the Germans' ass, So it's okay that they win because your average American viewer.
That means we're better. So
Yeah.
mathematically, if we beat the Nazis and the Nazis beat the Viet Cong, we beat both of them.
Rob?
It's like
We won Vietnam.
It's just turning into like seeding for the college football playoff. Like they're straight the schedule. They beat this. They have a better top opponent.
Scott, eventually the Khmer Rouge gets deposed. Who deposes them? How do they go down?
If I remember correctly, it's the Vietnamese army just rolls in.
Yeah.
They pretty much take them out pretty quick, and then they retreat back to the jungles, like on like the southwest part of the country, I want to say.
That was their goal for. A lot of parallels here.
Yeah, I think Vietnam kind of steamrolls them pretty easily, and they stay and they kind of operate out of power as like an insurgency terrorist group until like the 90s. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, and they had their seat on the UN.
Yeah, I think they had. This is based off what I read on Wikipedia.
Right.
Yeah, I think they had like a UN seat, and they were kind of recognized for a long time after they were out of power. But yeah, I don't think they did too well against the organized Vietnamese army.
All right, Lucas, you had mentioned you had some info to tell us about the Republican Guard. Can you go into that?
Yeah, I just want to touch on it since that's who they show on the show. That's who's doing the actual fighting for Saddam here. So the Iraqi Republican Guard, it's just the army that Saddam Hussein was in charge of. Founded in 1969, disbanded in 2003 after the invasion of Baghdad.
Talk about the Iraqi Guard, Dave.
The official equipment, I thought it was funny, on Wikipedia they had like a Call of Duty loadout for them. So here's their COD loadout. It is a T-72 tank, a Lion of Babylon tank, the AK-47, and the TT-33 pistol.
Perks?
Yeah, what about perks?
Hey, that's interesting that
Shades.
that's their loadout because that's the pistol they give to the Pol Pot.
Yeah, I mean, when we get to pistols, you
It's
might
so
find out that
funny.
might have been what they were actually
Yeah.
using.
They just swapped them by accident.
So where's their red at? The evil guy's got to wear red, right? Beret. Red beret. Unlike
Just
Robert
like
Daly, who wears a green one.
Wore a green one time.
You could also note Saddam had a very selective process for his Republican Guard. He liked to pick people out of like his home village just because he knew they would be loyal.
Interesting.
I told
They're like
Katie-
his Praetorian kind of.
It was kind of like these were all like village boys. So if he took them,
Island boys.
Island boys.
I live.
So if he took these guys in, they're they have like nothing, right? They're poor, common folk. If
Yeah.
he brings them into the fold, gives them cars, houses, he knows like
They're gonna
okay,
fight for him.
These are my guys for life, kind of thing.
Yeah,
That's
right.
that's how he always got loyalty, like wealth, gifts. That's like what he understood: violence and like wealth.
Yeah, interesting.
To just beat a dead horse, I told Katie the Robert Daly story the other day, so she like got up on the lore, and then I was recording, or not recording, I was typing up my notes, and then because I speak them out and let it just type it for me, and I go, they notably wore a red beret, unlike Robert Daly, who wore a green one, and I heard one laugh from the other room, and I was like,
Nice.
she gets it.
At least one person laughed at that joke.
All right. Well, gentlemen, speaking of these weapons, are we ready to dive into the weapons? That sounds like a yes. So,
Ready to dive into the same loadouts.
These weapons that killed countless civilians.
right. Yeah, the tools of the massacre, the tools of the trade. Lucas, you already mentioned the AK-47/AKM.
It's probably like the most used
Notoriously
weapon.
missing from this episode. However, it makes sense because it would just be the same
the
rifle.
fifth time we've
So,
seen it.
not now saying that, we do have a lot of very similar guns going against each other. So, for the first time in season 3, each warrior has 4 weapons instead of just 3. Which harkens back to season 2, of course, when everybody had 4.
I remember when they had fucking 5 on Green Bay Respect.
Yeah.
That was crazy.
Remember when this show was good?
Well, there is something to be said for the fact that this show is, in a lot of ways, just like weapons porn. Like, the majority of what the episode is, and what you're seeing most of the time, is like a dummy getting cut in half by a sword, or shooting a blood-filled mannequin with a machine gun or something, and that's sort of what you're there for.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then the history that's sprinkled in there, I think, is what's created such a niche audience for it because we get history buffs and stuff that come in here, and then you got people like military and weapons history, and so you kind of get on this show because it's like, this is kind of interesting, this is fun. And after season 1, they relegated it to like 4 weapons per warrior. And then in season 3, they do even less. It's like 3 weapons per warrior, and we're going to have a whole segment about these X factors. And I would almost say, guys, that is a huge downgrade.
Oh,
I know
100%,
we were calling for like specifics and, but you got to include this stuff. I don't know if anybody in the fan base was really calling for like, hey, give us one less weapon, and then tell us who has the better generalship or the better calm under fire. Like tactics, I think is relevant. Where they're fighting, what the situation is a little relevant. And we get some of that in season 3.
Well, we were talking about it with your guys' episode on like Napoleon, George Washington. It was good. Like,
yeah.
It tapers off really fast, though, this season. But you have a good feeling at the start, and then it's just like, oh, man.
I know. So let's just get into the weapons here. So not only is this the first time in Season 3 each warrior's getting 4 weapons, for the first and only time in the entire show, multiple weapons are tested in tandem. So I don't know. This makes me wonder, like, did they have limited range time, or did they anticipate that this episode would be like the big one of the season?
There's definitely, you're right, there's a story there. We don't know what it is, but there's a reason why. Yeah. Because it doesn't have anything to do with them being dictators. Like, because I think they sort of suggest that, like, I think at one point they might even say, because we're doing 2 of these warriors, we're doing all 3 weapons at once. And that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and then they don't include the knives in it randomly. So it's like they just have a whole weird section for it. So
what if there was like a giant test that literally was throw this grenade, hose them with the RPK, run up with the Browning, and then finish with a combat knife. Like literally everything in one test.
On a ballistic gel or a side of beef.
On a single ballistic gel.
That would take some serious killer instinct, I think.
And some initiative.
Yeah.
For simplicity's sake, we're going to go through these weapons and tests by the order they appear, because I think that's just the best way to go through it. The show first introduced 3 of Saddam's weapons. First up is the RGD-5 grenade, listed as a charge of 4 ounces, weight of 4 ounces, effective range of 40 yards, and a shrapnel of 350 fragments. So,
did you compare with the season 1?
I did not look it up, but this is the RGD-5's second appearance on the show, as it was also the Spetsnaz grenade in season 1. Lucas and Dan, anything to add about the RGD-5, and most importantly, did the Iraqi army use this grenade?
Okay, is it a good pick for Saddam Hussein's guard? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Is it like sin to have the same weapon on Deadliest Warrior? Also, yes. I hate when they do this.
Why would not the first time it's happened.
Why would the Iraqis be using Soviet weapons?
They got a treaty with them. They got a truce.
Yeah.
It's like...
the Soviets are always handing that shit.
Yeah.
I was kind of making a joke.
Yeah. My point in this is special weapons. Like, it should be something a little more...
There's an explosives
RPG
category.
or something, though.
Huh?
There's an explosives category. Why would this be listed as special weapons? That has to be the knife. I'm not like about to Google it or anything.
Let me tell you.
Combat knife is short range weapons, and RGD-5 is special.
I'll be damned. That's how it's listed. That's so weird.
Yeah,
it's like
they forget the script every time and they rewrite it.
Seems like
let me tell you what this thing is. So it's post World War II Soviet anti-personnel fragmentation grenade, designed in 1950s, been in service since 54. It's widely exported to the Middle East, still used by them today. It has about a 3.2 to 4.2 second pyrotechnic delay fuse. Inside is TNT, and it has a fatality radius of about 3 meters or 10 feet. So something that's interesting, why a lot of them like this, is it costs $5. Like, if you're comparing the different currencies, it costs $5 to buy one of these, making it extremely affordable. And this was the grenade used on May 10th, 2005, that was thrown at President George W. Bush and Georgian President Mikhail Saskilevich, sorry, don't know his name, by Vladimir Atruvian.
I thought that was a shoe.
That's a different event. Different event.
But it landed wrapped in a handkerchief 61 feet from the podium where both of their wives were sitting, but it failed to detonate, and that guy was later arrested.
The RGD size 5.
That was an actual assassination attempt. The shoe thing, I think, was just a guy getting pissed off and wanting to hit George.
That was actually the Austin Powers bad guy.
You know, which I gotta say,
Who throws a shoe?
Honestly.
George showing off his jock skills in that moment.
George W. Bush, season 6 warrior.
Right.
That shoe was the WMD we were all talking about.
George Bush versus Ulysses S. Grant.
Covert planning. They say that George Bush planned something that no one ever uncovered. So we have to give him this hidden X factor.
He would lose the X factor of like military intelligence.
Or just intelligence.
So I did look up the stats they gave the RGD5 in season 1, and it is like incomprehensible how they differed here. So it says range 50 yards. I guess it's just how far you can throw the grenade. 4 inches, 11 ounces, 3-yard kill zone.
That's it?
Fucking love it. They have like it weight, like in this, it's weight of 4 ounces.
Are you
and
sure?
here
I
it's
thought it was weight 11 in this one too.
Is it?
I think so.
I might have mistyped because I noticed charge and weight.
I have
were both
11
the
in
same.
my notes unless I mistyped.
You're correct. You're correct then. So, anyways, all there is to say about the RGD5.
Yeah, I mean, it's a grenade, Soviet grenade. You pull the pin, it goes boom.
Next up, they introduced the RPK light machine gun. I noticed they typed caliber 39 millimeter, which is clearly a typo. It should say 7.62 by 39 millimeter.
Now, my theory for that was because they both fire the same round, they wanted to pretend to like the mush brain audience that it was a different round.
Someone was right. They're about to export the file. They went.
Deleted it real quick. Yeah, I think it's more likely it's a fuck up. Somebody didn't, because we've seen it before. So I will note this is the same round that the AK-47 or the AKM fires that we've seen.
Bless you.
Thank you. That we've seen multiple times on the show. RPK is listed as a weight of 10 pounds, an effective range of 1,000 yards, and a magazine of 40 rounds. Lucas and Dan, anything to add about the RPK, and did the Iraqi army use this?
It's a Soviet light machine gun developed by Mikhail Kalashnikov. Ever heard of him? In the 1960s, so it is a newer weapon than some will see.
Is it part of the AK platform?
Yes, it absolutely is. It's been in service since '61 and pretty much every major conflict since. There's my note, built off the AK platform, essentially just bigger, beefier.
Yeah, it's a beefy AK.
Yeah. Rate of fire is around 600 a minute. They can be fitted with 75 round drum magazines also. And they have a thicker, longer barrel than the AKM, which allows it to be fired longer with a lot less loss of accuracy. So it comes with a bipod attached to it and has threaded barrel for flash hiders, compensators, blank firing adapters. And the butt stock is referred to as clubfoot style, which allows the user to fire from a prone position more comfortably.
Yeah.
Something interesting about this, a lot of machine guns, the barrel is not permanently fixed. That is not the case. This one has a permanently fixed barrel, so it cannot be interchanged. And yeah, they would have used this. I'm pretty sure there's like even pictures, like newspaper articles and stuff. You can see people holding
the RPK was designed as like the squad automatic weapon.
Yeah.
So the reason you see it in so many pictures too, the RPK is a pretty good example, and I'm sure the show did not do research like this deep into it, but Iraq did like locally manufacture RPKs themselves.
Yeah.
Like they made their own, so it'd stand to reason that they would.
seem to do that with a lot of the weapons that they had, and then those like Iranian versions of the weapons end up being worth like a lot of money because they're not that are made in small numbers.
Yeah.
I guess.
It's a pretty good fit, but I wonder if they did actually know, like, oh, they actually like make their own.
So in case you were wondering, we've talked about like different roles on a squad level. Basically, if you had an infantry squad, most of the guys would probably be armed with AK-47s or AKM rifles. You'd probably have 1 or 2 guys with a DMR. We would have probably the Dragunov, which we've seen before. And then this would be like the squad gunner, like the SAW guy, if you will. So Moving on to the Browning high power pistol.
You just reminded me of something I had to bring up. It was like a picture, like an old meme picture, and it had like the squad guys laying around, and the one guy just had an RPG like aimed at the ground. It was like, will someone please take that off him before we all die? Or he was like aiming it, but there was like a wall in front of him or something, like 10 feet away.
So Browning high power pistol, caliber 9mm, weight 2 pounds, effective range 50 yards, magazine 13 rounds. Quick little side note, Sabah tells the panel he used to carry an inscribed Browning high power gifted to him from Saddam. Lucas and Dan, anything to add about the BHP? And did the Iraqi army use this?
It's weird because I put on my note too. They just call it the Browning semi-automatic pistol.
Yes.
Like his intro, and I'm like, it's the Browning high power.
Yeah.
Like semi-automatic pistol is just a.
I know.
Not a name
It's
of
weird,
something.
and it doesn't. Usually they do that to like try to cut down on the technical lingo, but Browning high power
is
the same thing as saying
and more effective. Yeah.
and it's more accurate.
Yeah, it's just referring to the Browning high power, which is a pistol made by FN that's been in service in almost every country. Single action semi-automatic pistol designed by American firearm inventor John Browning. It's called the high power because it had double the magazine size of other guns, such as the Luger or the Colt 1911. It's been in service since 35. They stopped making them in 2018, but they brought the design back in 2022. It was originally designed for the French military requirement for a new service pistol. So
it got no action.
yeah. Just like they were heavily used during World War II. It's not very notable features. It's a very just basic design. It's functional. Under like Wikipedia for the Iraqi ground forces, it's listed as 1958 to 2003. So
Okay,
sure.
so they could have carried this. I didn't know if this was like Saddam's favorite pistol or something, or I don't know. Who knows?
So it was bugging me. I looked up the locally manufactured one.
Yeah.
It's called the Al-Quds M72, which is their local.
That's the
RPK. Yeah. And Saddam.
Al-Quds. That does sound cool.
Al-Quds?
Al-Quds. Do you like Al-Quds?
I think I like in the show that the general mentioned that he was like gifted that Browning high power because Saddam, that was like his favorite gift to give. Like if you got a pistol from Saddam, that was
his first birthday gift.
That's what I think. Like that was his favorite. Like again, going back to the psychology, like
God damn, it sounds like a lot of people could have been spared if somebody would have just had the man go to therapy.
Seriously, a lot of
men will literally take over Iraq before going to therapy. So
I think I had something else, but I forgot it after that.
So we see Calvin. We're back to the absolute Chad Calvin. His hair's looking good. It doesn't move throughout this entire
Slick
thing.
back, not
Slick.
not push back, slick.
It is like cemented.
He's got
What did Pauly D say? He's like,
It takes me 3 to 4 hours to do my hair.
well, no, he's like, my hair going 100 miles an hour down the highway doesn't move. What makes you think it's going to move in a gelato
He
shop?
thinks this hair's gonna get into the ice cream. Newsflash, brother. This hair ain't gonna move. 100 miles an hour down the highway on a street bike. It's not moving.
So Calvin's got his best hair going on. He has the squarish jaw of any expert we've seen on the show. He looks like the Chad meme, and this is way before the Chad meme. I couldn't get over it.
And that's got to be an X factor.
That is an X factor. So Calvin runs through the tests using Saddam's RGD5.
He does look, okay, Chad aside, he does look kind of inexperienced.
A little bit, yeah, but that's because he's just an actor that they're giving this gun to, probably.
Right.
He does his best, though. He tries to, both him and Jonathan try to play it up this episode. Like they try to add like a little bit of flair to when they're doing it. So we'll get into that. But
Grenades are fake.
right. So Saddam's RGD5 RPK.
But they threw it.
And
You saw him do it.
Browning pistol. The RGD5 takes out 2 targets according to the show's graphics. It's obviously not a real grenade, but the usual stunt explosion
When
the
they show the
does.
slow-mos, you never even see any fragmentation or anything. It's just like the most...
Yeah, it's
like,
just... it's too bad they didn't do the test they did on the Spetsnaz episode where they put it in a fucking washing machine. Like, what is that?
data.
It's to give it more frag. Calvin then fires 2 magazines from the RPK into 5 separate targets. The show... So I wrote this down. it was tough to tell whether this was actually an automatic weapon or if he was shooting it single fire.
I'm convinced it's single fire.
So here's the thing. I think for this test, mostly what they're doing is single fire, and they're just inserting the automatic sound effect. Because when you look, he's always shooting like one round.
Yeah.
However, we do see later in the car test, we do finally get a shot. It's like 2 seconds of him next to the car laying full auto, and you can see the charging handle on the RPK going pow, 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 pow. So
Movie magic.
this is capable of like automatic fire. But you know, they cut around it. They do the Deadliest Warrior editing. So he uses 2 magazines and 5 separate targets. It's not really stated how much ammo is being used here, but basically because the RPK and then Pol Pot's RPD are so similar, they basically make sure to put a magazine change in there. Like that the RPK, you're going to have to, for the same amount of rounds, you're going to have to do a magazine change, whereas the RPD you won't.
How do you not know how many rounds are fired? They have that extremely accurate counter.
That's only for the second test. They don't do it for this test. So Calvin finishes the course off by firing the Browning into the 2 remaining targets.
Sounds like a double tap to me.
Matt gives us the line, sounds like a double tap.
Sounds like a double tap.
Calvin finishes the course with an overall time of 2 minutes, 5 seconds. The targets from the course become overrun by bees.
Not the bees.
Dorian explains in the aftermath that the bees were attracted to the fake blood, which is syrup-based. They later moved to a water-based blood.
You're fucking encroaching on my aftermath corner.
Sorry. It's
He's like talking to, and they're swarming so loud you can like barely hear
They
them.
keep showing clips of it in the episode. So it's a cute moment of the show, in my opinion. Next, we get introduced to 3 of Pol Pot's weapons. The show mentions that Saddam had oil money and could supply his troops with quality equipment. We were still checking out Calvin's Instagram.
So it is.
Oh God, Jesus, Craig.
It is pretty fascinating.
So, wait. So Calvin's doing like a back workout. Look at his mask.
The ones and zeros
like a
aren't
Halloween-
gonna like
Like a
this.
Jabberwock. Okay.
So Calvin has a Jabberwocky mask, and his caption is, can someone tell me where King Kong is? Person says yes at Universal Studios. Calvin replies with crying, laughing cat emojis.
Nice.
Sorry.
So the show mentions that Saddam had oil money and could supply his troops with quality equipment.
But what about internet money?
Right. In contrast, the show mentions that much of Khmer Rouge's arsenal came from communist China, as we talked about before. So, first weapon that's introduced is the Chinese stick grenade, a charge of 6 ounces. So, right there, we already know it's getting the edge because it has a bigger charge than the RGD5. Weight of 1.3 pounds, effective range 30 to 40 yards, improvised shrapnel sleeve, which I think Jonathan mentions, like you could fill it with nails.
He tries to do a last minute sew, like we could attach glass and nails and improve the frag just to try and
It's
push it over the
it's
edge.
tactical. So, Craig and Scott. I think, Scott, you did a lot of weapons research here.
It's all you, my friend.
A
Anything
lot of weapons.
anything to add about the stick grenade? And did the Khmer Rouge actually use this? And did they actually add nails and barbed wire to it?
So for like a lot of these weapons, I tried looking stuff up, and there's just not a lot of stuff
Yeah.
on their weapons. It's a Chinese grenade. The Chinese based it off a German grenade from like World War I and World War II. So Khmer Rouge got their stuff from China. That was their main supplier of weapons. And then same thing for all these guns. Like you had the French Indochina War, the war in Vietnam. So a lot of those guns are just in that area of the world. And as a guerrilla force, they kind of just took what they could get. So yeah, they probably used Chinese grenades. So
I'm sure they're not picky.
no,
Yeah.
just take what you can get.
Next introduced is the RPD light machine gun, caliber 7.62 by 39 millimeters, same as the RPK. Weight of 16 pounds, so a little heavier. Effective range of 1,000 yards. Magazine 100 rounds. So this is probably the biggest contrast is the RPD's got a 100-round drum magazine, while as the RPK has 40-round banana magazines, similar to the AK. So, Scott, anything to add about the RPD?
So I'm not a big gun guy in terms of there's the not gun guy side of the table here, gun guy side of the table. What I was reading, so like the RPD is the basic Russian version of that gun, of what they named it. But like a bunch of different countries like reverse engineer it and make their own. And China made its own kind of RPD, and I believe it was like the Type 56.
Okay.
And
Anything the Soviet Union made, you could bet the Chinese made it too.
Yeah, so it's essentially the same gun, and so I don't know if they just call it the RPD for just simplicity's sake of, you know, maybe
Probably.
people play Call of Duty, so they know that's what it is.
I was about to say I remembered it's like the first LMG you get in COD.
Yeah, so, and just wondering in my research, like, the Khmer Rouge didn't really get along with Russia, per se, because they were enemies with the Vietnamese, who were supported by the Russians. So they probably had the Chinese version of that gun. I don't know if that's a better or worse version of that gun, or if it's essentially the same thing. But, yeah, it's a...
Yeah.
They say it while Craig's not here. In the aftermath, it's like the precursor to the RPK. Like It's the older version.
Yeah.
That we can go into why they replaced it.
I knew about that. I knew that the RPK replaced it. So
Yeah.
it's interesting.
A lot of it is because of the belt fed system.
That's what
wasn't
they
it?
talk about in the aftermath because of jams and stuff.
Yeah. I'll let Craig cover that in the aftermath. So the Tokarev TT-33 pistol, caliber 9mm, so same as the Browning high power, weight of 1.87 pounds, effective range of 50 yards, and a magazine of 8 rounds. So smaller magazine.
You already know.
Browning.
Lost.
Right. So this is the second time the Tokarev has made an appearance, as it also was the pistol for the Viet Cong. However, unlike the Viet Cong's Tokarev, this one is chambered in 9mm for some reason. Typically, the Tokarev is chambered in the larger 7.62 by 52mm Tokarev round. This large round got it the nickname the Soviet hand cannon. Not sure why the show made this change. Could be availability, or maybe the Iraqis made this version. Scott, anything to add about the TT-33, and did the Khmer Rouge use it?
So kind of in the same vein, the Chinese reverse engineered this pistol, and they call everything type, I guess, and I want to say it was Type 56 or Type 54. I pulled it right here.
Yep.
And it's essentially that gun. I can't remember the specifics of it, but I do remember for some reason them talking about the 9mm versus whatever other shell it was, and that there are different versions of it. And once again, it's a Russian-made pistol, Chinese-made pistol in that part of the world at that time. So there were probably a lot of them there, and yes, they probably used them.
I think the most interesting thing to note about this entire... So this is not the first time it's happened on this show with particular weapons, but this is the first time it's probably happened with the entire arsenal of both warriors, that you could copy and paste each of these over to the other team.
Of course, I had to look at the Deadliest Warrior wiki, and for the Pol Pot weapons, I believe they say in reality, Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge realistically used all of the Saddam weapons.
Yeah, and I think vice versa too. You would find RPDs and, as we already mentioned, Tokarevs in the Republican Guard, because
you have these countries like the U.S. or the Soviet Union that you would consider more powerful, funding these with these proxy wars. So
and it's all the same stuff, because like you were saying, Scott, this stuff is mass produced in Asia by the Russians, the Chinese, I'm pretty sure the Vietnamese and the Koreans make some too. So it's just prevalent in that area of the world. These are the weapons that are laying around.
Yeah, these are the two groups that are they're going to, whatever they could find too, they're just going to use.
One thing I was thinking of, and I think I know the answer of why they didn't do it, but in terms of different weapons they could use, I think it would have been cool if they did mortars. That makes no sense for a squad fight, and they probably didn't do it.
When have we broken that rule?
And that's what I'm saying. They could have faked it, we're going to fire this mortar, but in reality, it's an explosion at a range. Yeah. But I thought that could have been something cool.
Yeah, something different.
Something different.
They're just angling the mortar down to the people 20 feet away.
Yeah, because I'm they probably couldn't do that for
how fake would that have been?
Yeah, range purposes. But I'm well, they claim that they set off a car bomb and fired an RPG twice. They probably could have faked
the car bomb was like a mushroom cloud explosion.
Every once in a while, go back and watch that RPG round riding down that wire. If you don't watch it for a while and you go back and watch it, it's fucking hilarious.
It's so funny.
It rejuvenates the joke.
I think that
Again, mentioning a better controversial episode, I'd say.
I just think it's a downfall of this episode of it's, guns, and you've seen the guns kind of before. I thought, maybe that would have been a fun.
There's not a whole lot of difference. In fact, you can look at their stat sheets that they list at the beginning and know what's going to get the edge, because there's literally nothing else to determine the edge within the confines of Deadliest Warrior. Like, there's ways you could test these weapons otherwise, but in the format of Deadliest Warrior,
And their dumb logic.
there's only
where
so many ways you could test these things.
What has more ammo? What has a bigger round?
So, for the test for Pol Pot, Jonathan throws the stick grenade, killing the same number of initial targets as the RGD-5, according to the show's graphic. Again, the grenade is fake, and this is a stun explosion.
Also, I think they forgot to tell him to throw it the first time, because it's definitely a spliced in shot of him throwing it like a different time.
Yeah. Kilong Ung gives us the line, "Now that's the sound I remember." Not sure whether to
Very
laugh.
dark.
Yeah,
Yeah, not
I gotta
sure
react to that.
whether
Kill
to
the mood.
laugh or cry at that.
X Factor.
Memorable noise.
Trauma. PTSD.
Jonathan delivers a melee to a target's face on his way to the second stage, where he fires a number of rounds to take out 5 targets. They definitely wanted to highlight the magazine change versus the drum in this test, since it doesn't seem like Jonathan used his entire mag. He probably didn't. Again, we don't know how many rounds they fired. Jonathan finishes off the last couple targets with the Tokarev. He finishes with a time of 2 minutes and 2 seconds.
Now, is this the test, though, that you explained the behind the scenes to it to me?
So here's the thing. I went back and watched that. I'm going to let Craig cover that part in the aftermath, and we can discuss it. I looked closer, and I was actually incorrect about some of my assumptions, because I'm looking at the side of the gun where the belt is coming out, and I'm assuming they're not using the round drum. The belt is just hanging loose. But you can see from the other side of the gun that belt is coming out of the round drum. So we'll get into it more on the aftermath, what you're talking about. So time for edges. I love getting edged.
You love edging.
I love edging. Chinese
Sound bit.
Chinese stick grenade. Mac likes the greater explosive power of the Chinese stick grenade. Jeff likes the RGD-5's smaller size. And Dorian decides it for the stick, since there's a lack of roll. The RGD-5 rolls like a baseball.
Dude, when that thing goes off, man, you got vertigo. Your head is whirling, man.
Yeah, they go through the target. I skipped a lot of that, but because it's ironic, because usually we do a lot of notes about that stuff, but there's nothing really that gets said that's mind-blowing. They bring up initiative a lot.
They bring up the killing thing whenever Calvin's in there, that he does the final execution with the handgun.
Killer instinct.
He's that's the killer instinct. That's gonna be an X factor.
He's literally just doing the course.
He talks about the grenade too, about how it's gonna cause whirling and vertigo and everything. I'm pretty sure in every other episode he goes, "That's not a kill," is what that means.
Yeah. So Dorian decides it for the stick with a lack of roll. Like I mentioned, it's an unbroken rule of this show that the bigger boom always gets the edge in explosions. So I wasn't surprised here. Anybody got any thoughts?
I mean, it's fine. I think it's dumb. There's a reason we don't have stick grenades in the military anymore.
Well, I was going to say, I never realized that's why it's a stick, because it doesn't roll.
Right, yeah.
But
and you can also, I feel like, throwing it this way, people point out, you can throw it farther. If you think about throwing a stick like that versus having to throw a ball, you can get a stick to go farther because of the motion.
I feel like I would have a much harder time throwing the stick. I feel like I would screw up just the distance of it, because didn't the military purposely make the U.S. military hand grenades like baseball, because people know how to throw a baseball?
Yeah,
it's easier
probably.
to throw, and it's space also. Those things are 3 times the size of the thing that big.
I just know I feel like I could I massively underthrew that.
So
I need to run.
I'm not being my dad.
I'm not surprised.
I've thrown a grenade in real life, and I'll tell you the one thing: no matter how far you throw it,
Credentials.
You tell yourself that wasn't far enough.
Credentials.
That is your first thought is, oh shit, that wasn't far enough.
Yeah, I don't know.
Lucas, I threw a grenade once, Earhart.
So I'm not surprised the stick gets the edge, because it's that we make up rules for this show about who wins and what weapons get the edge. That explosion rule, I think, is 100 for 100 across the entire series. There is never a time where they argue about different things, like, well, you can carry more, you can be more mobile, you can target. Doesn't matter. Landmine, grenade,
Car bomb.
the car bomb, the mechanical
The
landmine.
mechanical landmine that was like a mousetrap game. You step on it, like the ball starts going down through the thing and it comes down.
Rube Goldberg machine.
Pee-wee's breakfast machine.
It does not matter on the show. The bigger boom gets the edge on explosions. That's like the logic they stuck to, and it's like the one and only that never gets broken at all. Next up, we talk about the Browning high power. Oh, my only thoughts on the Chinese stick grenade getting the edge is just that, like, I'm not surprised it does because of the explosion, but the stick grenades, nobody uses it anymore. Like, the type of grenade that the RGD-5 is, like, that's what everybody uses. And I'm pretty sure it's just because you can carry way more.
Yeah, you can carry way more. It's the stick's just kind of useless.
Yeah, it's like hanging off your belt.
In reality, you can throw them just as far.
It had its time. So next up, they compare the pistols and they give the edge to the Browning high power. Browning gets the edge for its greater magazine capacity.
Sure.
Anybody got any thoughts? I mean, it makes sense.
It's probably the most logical argument they've made on the show in a while. So
I forget. In the show, did they say the Tokarev was 9 mil?
Yes.
I mean, if everything's the same, like mag capacity, it's
Right. It's
yeah.
like the only thing to call.
If they stuck with the actual like Tokarev Soviet round, like the little fatty one, maybe
Right.
you could have an argument. But
So that was my only thought, Dan, is giving this the bigger Tokarev round would have made for a more interesting debate, because it's like, would you rather have 8 rounds of a bigger bullet, or would you rather have 16 rounds of a smaller bullet?
that's like the only grounds I could think this means anything.
it's almost like the weapons are just an afterthought in this episode. I swear. I'm feeling that now.
And the one grievance relievance I have,
Yeah.
of course, I'm fucking so mad. The I'm soy boying here, soy facing over Green Beret Spetsnaz.
It all goes back to that.
It all goes back to that. That was the defining, when they have the Deadliest Warrior episode about my reign of terror, it'll go back to this episode. Green Beret versus Spetsnaz, they give the edge to the Makarov over the Beretta, and we argued on that show that the M9 carries twice as many rounds as the Makarov, but the show never mentions it. They give the edge to the Makarov due to a night vision test that's probably faked, and then the ballistic knife gets more kills than the M9 in the sim. So pretty funny. Just a little bit triggered at that, because then in this one they do what they should have done in that episode, and they just go like, well, they fire the same round. Let's just give the edge.
See, this is a different, more advanced sim. Okay, we're gonna get better results that aren't completely just made up.
Yeah, that aren't made up like season ones.
There's a funny line when they're talking about the edges, and Jeff's like, I kind of like the Tokarev because it's got that low profile, and then Mac's like, yeah, it has a lower profile because it carries less rounds. You fucking idiot.
That is like the hard cut too. They're like edge,
and Jeff
Browning.
just bows down.
Jeff
He's
is
like,
like,
yes, daddy.
He's like, okay, sorry.
how dare you even bring that up?
Yes, daddy, backwards.
So, nobody has any thoughts.
No.
They glance over the pistols. They really don't talk.
Yeah.
I mean,
They glance over most stuff.
Yeah.
The LMGs are really the only thing that get any kind of like screen time on.
Yeah, we get at least because we get the follow up test. That's about it.
Yeah.
So,
and you know what? We only have. Well, I guess we have 2 more tests, but because this is like the same fucking weapons again.
yeah, they have a second test for both LMGs simulating an ambush on a car. So it's like if you're gonna ambush a motorcade. So it's definitely inspired by the Saddam.
Yeah, they're like, pull the car. It's on a rope and it moves like 3 feet forward. It just hits a barrel. It's like, wow, dude, that's simulation.
So both teams have 80 rounds to fire at the car. I don't know if that's what they actually got or not, but that's what we're told. Both Jonathan and Calvin fire 80 rounds. And of course, Calvin requires a mag change halfway through, which causes him to finish with a slower time of 59 seconds.
He blunders it. He blunders it.
To Jonathan's 46 seconds. Also,
Failure.
Calvin gives us an Allahu Akbar chant during this test. He must be a fan of Return of the Jedi. So while reviewing the carnage, Dorian mentions this is the the classic best way to kill somebody.
Wait, did you say Return of the Jedi?
Akbar, Admiral.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Continue.
Right. He also compares it, the damage to using an ice cream scooper to just scoop out someone's bodies and vitals. Kilong is standing right there. Kilong mentions that he remembers hearing the sound of the RPD during, the genocide, and that he came across the aftermath of a mass shooting where there was bodies and guts everywhere. He then says a couple Khmer Rouge soldiers put similar guns to his head, and they were probably around 12 or 13 years old.
When the war in Cambodia happened, I was just a boy. There was a time I've heard the exact same sound when I got there. I saw bloods and guts just like this. I had a couple of Khmer Rouge soldiers that put similar guns to my head. They were about 12 or 13 years old.
All of these things have to factor in for psychological health in the sim.
What's your response when someone tells you
credit Dorian for transitioning out of that the way he did. Because what do you even say to that?
What do you say? Like, damn, bro.
I love,
And that's going to be in the sim
And
factor.
and that brutality is an X factor.
There's like a moment too where Dorian walks up originally too, and he opens a door, and this thing is just carved up. There's just nothing left of this, and he goes to like one little bullet hole down on the bottom, and he goes right here, entrance wound right here.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, just ignoring the entire
whole thing
caved
is
out
just
chest.
shredded. RPK blows one of their heads off. Do we have any thoughts about this test in particular? Do we want to get to the edge here?
I appreciated this test for what, not the horrific breathing behind it, but
listen, we're here to watch this for the show, right? Like, this is what we're here for. I'm not gonna
like an old school test, like one where they're like, let's just take these guns and shoot up a car, like a season 1 test where they're like, let's just unload on a car, and we'll pretend like we get some results.
I had a couple of thoughts. First off, and this is in the previous test as well, Mac is giving shooting advice. Like, do you ever like go out, let's just say for a work outing, and there's that dude who has experience with whatever you're doing, like bowling, and he's trying to subtly indicate that he has experience. So he's like, oh, sounds like a double tap.
Sounds like a double tap. There you go. Nice. Change your magazine. Make sure he's down. That's effective fire right there. Nice. Now it's time to move.
Okay, he's
Keep moving. Smooth burst. Nice transition. First fire. Don't blow all your rounds.
You want to make sure you want to reload. Like, shut the fuck up.
He's like, slow burst, control that fire.
Transition.
Nothing's funnier than when you're with that guy and he fucks up something.
Yeah.
He's bowling, he slips and like falls on his ass or something.
Because he wants everybody to be like, you know about this? Like, fuck you.
Yeah.
So that shit pisses me off. The other thing too is, I mean, I've never shot a gun at a car, but I feel like it's dangerous, especially when Calvin is like
2
pretty
feet from
fucking
it.
close to the car, and he's just shooting it.
I have experience shooting a car with it.
That close?
Yeah.
Is it
With a
safe?
shotgun. I mean, what, were we in a safe environment? Perhaps. Was it back in the woods? Am I here? I'm fine.
Yeah, so I will say I've gotten a chance at a friend's farm to shoot guns at like different appliances, and it is not safe to be that close, Craig, especially because like I remember doing it one time. I had safety gear on, but like you do get shit that flies back at you and hits you, and if it's like metal, or any kind of shrapnel, it can come back and like fucking smack you in the face.
Yeah, with an RPK too, like he fucked that car up like it was a baked potato.
Well, like the car doesn't like shatter or explode or anything. It just kind of goes through the sheet metal and it like just gets lost inside somewhere.
Yeah.
And it might. So yeah, like whenever I did it, we had fun. Yeah, no one got hurt or anything.
Yeah,
so.
sure. I was referring out Craig saying he's like right there. He's got like the RPK like point blank, and that's where you get the shot of the gun going full.
That can't be safe because
he's obviously trying to sell it, and make it more cool, but probably
not the safest. Close. I probably wasn't as close as him. I was probably like 10, 20 feet.
Right.
If you are worried about that, Ricochet or whatever, if you're not an alpha male, because he's such an alpha, he doesn't care.
He's representing
He doesn't
Saddam,
give a
though.
shit.
If he got wounded in the arm, it'd be all the more authentic.
I
Right.
get a pistol from.
He's a Viking warrior.
You know,
Yeah.
he might get wounded, but his hair won't. I can guarantee that.
100 miles an hour. This area.
His hair deflects the shrapnel.
I mean, at least this test is like, it's the most tasteful you can get with like, okay, these warriors are killing civilians.
The context behind it. But it did feel like a good old school test where they just wanted
And
to shoot the shit out of
It
something.
is nice that this test solidifies our awesome reenactment shot of Fahim Fazli in the car.
Dude, that is one of the best scenes.
We'll get to that as Lucas is out for Sim
I'm
Corner.
excited for that.
So for the Edge, Mac makes the case for the RPD's greater mag capacity. Dorian likes the RPK because it's lighter, which is going to lead to less fatigue in the man. Jeff sides with Mac's logic about greater mag capacity. Do we have any thoughts on the Edge? Because like both of the tests for these weapons really tell you absolutely nothing besides the fact that they both can murder you, and one has a bigger mag than the other, and that's what this ends up just boiling down to. Is very simple. And
here's
it's
my
the
problem.
same logic as like pistols.
What do you want more? An extra 55 rounds or the like possibility you jam? That's it.
Yeah.
Now, AK platform is notably like the hardest platform in the world to reload. Those, just it's like the easiest gun in the world to reload. Honestly,
it's designed to be simple. And Mac goes into, he's like, if you miss, like catch, it's
literally the
Single
easiest thing to
latch.
reload. Yeah, and I mean, they like forget to mention too that when that belt runs out, those things are notably a lot harder to
I
reload.
was about to say we should have gotten because they do 80 rounds.
Yeah, watch him try to like roll that belt up in the
But
thing for like
it
10
would have been
minutes.
interesting to see if they had to shoot, I don't know, by groups of 40, maybe like 120 rounds.
Yeah.
And,
Make them
and
do a
see
reload.
what happens when the RPD has to reload after it's 100
I can
rounds.
guarantee you.
I guarantee the RPK would have gotten a faster time.
Oh yeah, I can guarantee
Even
you
with
that
two
would be a
reloads?
good minute to reload.
Even with 2 reloads,
When
that RPK would have been fast.
When it comes to the Edge, I think it should just start and end at the fact that the RPK, there's a reason that replaced
Yeah,
the RPD.
but it has infinite ammo. There's a scene where they cut the commercial right here, and there's a dude firing. I think it's the RPD, and they put in the full auto thing, but to sell it, he's like rocking the gun back and forth, and it's like it looks hilarious.
Yeah.
Well, he's like prone, and he's like, you can see it like rocking the gun forward.
A good
and back.
While he's like just massacring like, a wave of people.
A good counter, you could just say the RPK can take a drum.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, you can get like a 75 round drum with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say just going by what replaced what, I feel like the RPK should get the edge, especially since their whole point when they bring up these guns is that like Saddam's got money, so he's buying better
it's the
equipment.
nicest.
I thought you said you were making a like your point was for Pol Pot, so I thought you said a Pol Point.
Whole point. Here's my. You guys are missing the whole point of the episode. But I see the logic the show's employing, so I'm not like super heated about it or whatever. Any thoughts on the Pol Pot side? Do you like that your guy got the edge?
Any thoughts on that Pol Point?
Yeah.
Fuck Saddam Hussein. Man.
Anything from the potheads?
The potheads defer our time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So next up, we all of a sudden cut to the 4th weapon that each warrior has. And if you thought the previous weapon test went by fast, this one is like
If you thought the previous test didn't do anything useful,
blink and you'll miss it. So we get Saddam Hussein's got the combat knife.
can't even be bothered to name it.
Weight of 0.7 pounds, blade width of 1/8 of an inch, 5.7 inches of steel blade, which 5.7, that's a lot. That's like above average.
It's
More
almost,
than enough.
This 5.7 is almost too big.
Right.
It's like getting into like ridiculous territory.
Yeah. And then they need to mention that it has a wood handle.
Cool.
So you're not grabbing the blade.
Because they're out of facts about it already.
This is so you guys can correct me if I'm wrong here when I kick it over to you, but this to me is clearly like an AK-47 bayonet.
Yeah,
exactly the one we see in IRA versus Taliban. But they're probably just calling it a knife here since the AKM's absent from the
Wrong.
episode.
Wrong. It's
Although-
the reverse bayonet.
Although I will bring this up, and maybe you guys can answer this question for me. I do wonder, since the RPK is so similar to the AK, couldn't this bayonet just fit on an RPK?
There is no lug to attach it on the front.
Okay.
Yep.
So
that is
never
one of the like downsides of that gun. But I mean, if you're a light machine gunner, you're probably not going to be bayonet on people.
Yep. Yeah.
I'm like pretty sure on that. I could double check, or
Okay.
I can't. But I'm pretty sure.
I believe you.
Yeah.
So anything to tell me about the bayonet, guys?
It attaches to the front of a rifle. It's a knife.
Yeah,
It's from Soviet Russia.
Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say Sabah gives us a funny segment where he describes what he would do with a combat knife, and the explanation is ultimately him going, if he's next to me, I'd stab sideways. If he's above me, I'm stabbing upwards.
And if he's still alive, we take him prisoner. I'm watching him swing this thing around. I'm like, who gave this guy the knife to just swing around right now? Someone's going to get hurt.
Further solidifies my theory that Sabah just kind of like my cynical opinion about him getting out.
Where am I?
Getting out while the.
I love that.
Yeah.
No man's above me. Stab him. Like, what scenario?
I did a lot to become a captain. Some serious combat.
Yeah, I get the impression a lot of, in the Iran-Iraq war, a lot of the combat was like very trench, close warfare, gritty combat. I feel like that's where a lot of the inspiration came from to add like the bayonet, but I'm also probably giving them way too much credit.
You could have not even included these weapons and it would not have mattered.
I feel like they had the cane knife and they wanted to include that.
Yeah.
Because it's like a Khmer Rouge weapon.
It's more iconic than the bayonet.
And they just had to... It's very much like the previous bayonet when that shows up in the Taliban episode, because they wanted to give the IRA the slingshot.
Yeah.
Because I feel like they had a story with that. They had a particular reason to give them that. And
the melee weapons.
They needed something to go against them.
Yeah, combat knife's a good fit. Like...
I mean, it's fine.
The jumper cables were already taken by Pol Pot.
Right, yeah. Then we get the cane knife, weight of 1.25 pounds, blade...
Jumper cables would have been funnier than a knife.
Blade width of 1/8 of an inch, 13.5-inch steel blade. That is terrifying. I would not want anything that big.
Yeah, this edge is BS.
Yeah, 5 inches is more than enough. And again, wooden handle. Craig and Scott, any notes on the cane knife?
Was the handle really wooden?
Was his teeth made of wood? No, there's a lot of sugar cane in Cambodia. I looked. 2021, they grew or harvested 3 million tons of it, they say. So just used to cut down the sugar cane, cut through the jungle, kind of like the machete and cartel.
How many of their own people did they harvest?
Jesus.
I plead the fifth on that one. Yeah. So it's just a tool.
Sugar exports.
Yeah, it's just a tool that you can also use to kill people. They say in the Edge, is it the CIA guys, this is a farmer's tool. We have this in Iraq.
Right.
The farmers use it. What's the difference? It's like a foot-long blade.
We can get to that because ironically, this might have the most interesting Edge debate to happen. So I was looking for anything when I was writing this up. So Calvin and Jonathan test their respective knives against a static hunk of beef, or as
bovine torso,
and
which is such a funny phrase. The fanciest way to say a fucking
slab of beef.
Yeah, a bovine torso.
I'm going to go to a fancy restaurant, be like, I'll have the bovine torso.
So they have the static bovine, and then they have the charging slab of beef that's going down like a wire. The combat knife delivers a kill to both targets and clocks in a speed of 40 miles per hour, while the cane knife only delivers one killing blow, according to Dorian, albeit a far more impressive slice on the first target.
Because of what Sabah said, they should have dangled the cow above him.
Yeah. And it clocks in at a speed of 45 miles per hour.
Has that speed stat ever mattered once?
I also don't think it's real in this case.
Yeah.
It just seems like...
The only time it ever mattered was the Spartan Shield space shuttle launch.
Spartan Shield just fucking...
The Skyrim troll.
Yeah, exactly. Like the giant in Skyrim hitting you and you just fucking launched in a...
See, the cane knife's not going to be effective because they might be wearing t-shirts.
Nice. So they give the edge to the combat knife since it's a thrusting weapon. It requires much less effort to kill with. I did note that this runs completely counter to the typical Deadliest Warrior doctrine of giving the edge to the bigger sword. So I brought up the bigger boom always gets the edge. Typically on this show, the longer melee weapon gets the edge. The only other case I can think of where they give it to the smaller knife is the stiletto over the Bowie.
Infamous.
This also reminds me of another infamous one, which is the E-tool over the ballistic knife, because the cane knife gets accused of being a gardening tool, while the knife is a weapon. What are our thoughts on this edge, guys?
Good.
I could give two fucks about this.
There's in it, so like when they were going over the shot of what they do with the cane knife, he goes in with the first big cut and it goes right through, and then while he's waiting for the flying bovine to come at him, he realizes
it's like he panics.
No, if you
I'm seeing fatigue in the man.
If you look at how he cuts it, he's like, oh, I can do more damage, and he's holding it like over here. And if you look, he cuts with the back side of the cane knife.
He does, yeah.
So it obviously it doesn't go in as far as if he hit it with the full blade. So and essentially, like, he tried to do more damage and he just fucked up because if it wasn't a good cut, but he didn't cut it right with the right blade. So
definitely a case of like the expert is the one that fucks up the weapons test, but they don't bother rolling it again. They just go with it. They're
Listen, when I go to my favorite fancy restaurant and order my bovine torso, they don't bring me a cane knife to cut it. They bring me a AK-47 bed.
They bring you the AK. You have to take the knife off.
You're holding the gun and cutting your bovine torso.
I wrote my thoughts here.
And then you finger your potato.
oh my God.
She's creaming. That's what the caption was.
That was the craziest shit I ever saw.
She's sour creaming.
Baked potato. I'll never look at a baked potato the same way.
Basically, the undisputed champ of season 3 experts, probably.
So I do have it on good authority. My old Krav Maga instructor did say that thrusting attacks are harder to block, but I don't know if that applies to 3-foot machetes.
Yeah, I would say I disagree with the edge. Only by Deadliest Warrior standards.
Yeah.
So I would say the argument they use against it's pretty weak, as a knife by definition is both a tool and a weapon. It's like they bring a baseball bat into one episode and it's like they give that the edge, but just because it's not designed as a club, it is a weapon.
Listen, if my grappling hook can't get the edge, then neither can this.
Right. With the scenario the show's presenting, it's a close quarters knife fight. So in my opinion, hand-to-hand or knife training would be the biggest key in this situation, which I guess makes sense because, the Pol Pot guy is not going to know to stab above if the guy's above you. Having the larger knife would give you an advantage, I think. But I did know if you stick that bayonet on the end of a rifle as it's meant to be, suddenly, that clearly gets the edge out. So... Not egregious. I just think I'd put something because I wanted to say something other than
Yeah.
And when it's all said and done, again, blink and you miss it. We're already done with this test.
Yeah.
Who cares?
So let's move into our favorite segment of any of season 3, the X Factor.
Brandon, what are we at right now? Bro, what's the time?
2:25.
Oh, really?
We're running clean, boys. Let's go.
That seems like a lot.
right?
I'm surprised. Brandon, how are you doing?
There's
what are you reading?
Isaac Asimov.
How do you read something and then also listen at the same time?
Very carefully.
It's easy. It's easy if he tunes you out.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair.
X Factors. Our first X Factor, and basically the only one we needed on the episode, was training.
Best X Factor so far this entire season, in my opinion. The only one that has made sense to me.
So Saddam gets a 70, Pol Pot gets a 53. So we're
reasonable.
We're always talking about how the numbers seem very arbitrary and the same, and we do get one of those, but in this episode they're all over the place. They're handing out 20s, 50s, 40s. So I wrote not to bitch about this too much because, like you, Lucas, I do agree it's not that egregious compared to a lot of X Factors we've seen. My only criticism would be that training is so broad. Would this not affect other factors that have been put in, like tactics?
Yeah, I did.
Wouldn't this affect your calm under fire, your killer instinct? Wouldn't training affect all of that stuff across the board?
Yeah, I did a lot of I did a lot of research on Saddam Hussein for this episode,
A
and
lot of training.
felt like
You
it.
have something to tell us, Dan.
How do you think I got my Browning?
What's your extremism rating?
I did a lot of research, and I don't think Saddam had any like formal training to speak of, other than just like.
No, I doubt it, but it's for our team.
The Republican Guard.
Shut up.
The Republican Guard definitely did, though.
Of course, his soldiers did, but like, again, where's that line draw between him being in the factor?
Right. Is it 5 Saddams? It's clearly 1 Saddam and 4 Republican Guards is what they say. So.
Yeah.
It's so much lower in that chair than me. I feel like I'm talking to,
And then Craig is like super close to the camera.
I feel like I'm talking to Tiny Tech.
Our perspective.
All right.
Yeah, that's all I had to say on training.
So the next X factor is psychological health. Saddam gets a 46 to Pol Pot's 27. Robert Daly says both these guys are completely insane. I would actually like to ask both teams here. Okay, let's start with the Pol Pot team.
Potheads.
Obviously, both these guys did some awful things. Would you say they're insane? How much weight is insane carrying here? Was Pol Pot Joker-fied, would you say? What are you guys' thoughts?
Well,
Because keep in mind, you can get out of going to jail by saying you're insane. Like,
well, jail. You still go to like.
I know, but if you plead insanity,
Super jail?
Our legal system thinks like you are not accountable for your actions. So I thought the use of the word insane here, maybe I'm just cherry picking because they're using it as like a catch-all. I don't like it that they use that word though.
Yeah.
Because it kind of absolves these guys,
Right.
I
Yeah.
feel like, of a lot of
think he
stuff.
is using that,
What do you
like-
guys think
Um,
from your research?
That's a good point. I mean, as I talked about, he was from a good household. He wasn't broken at all, and he just seems like someone that was. Maybe in this case he would be insane because he did like Saddam obviously had a very broken home and was sort of radicalized, you could say, in a sense, versus Pol Pot didn't have any of that from what I could tell and wanted to convert Cambodia without any sort of like environmental influence. So that could be one of the biggest. That could be an interesting reason why these two fight. Is they're almost the inverse of each other. Where Pol Pot was somebody who, had a good childhood, but still ended up with these ideas, and he was very charismatic. Versus Saddam, who what are you looking at?
It's like
Your mic was falling. That's all. Sorry. The reason we were
Versus Saddam, who was from a very broken home, was influenced by a lot of anti-Semitic uncles.
They're out there. You know?
Yeah. So that's my piece.
who isn't?
What are your thoughts, Scott? What are your thoughts on this psychological health section?
I get what you're talking about like insane and absolving them. I didn't
Because
really-
Pol Pot the Joker,
no, I don't. I think he clearly had a plan. The Joker didn't have a plan.
right? Yes, thank you.
But wasn't that his plan?
It's like the best answer to give.
Yeah. I don't know. I think like it's like every episode of the show, they just want to focus on something and they're just talking about how deranged these people
Yeah.
are. What like normal person. So I don't know. It's whatever. They're bad people. They're dictators. Like,
Yeah.
Emphasis on dick.
They put the dick in the dictator.
You guys got any thoughts on this psychological health segment?
I don't think.
Sodomites.
Yeah, it's the potheads and the sodomites.
Yep.
Do you think Calvin put his dick in that tater?
I'm waiting for him to respond, and I'll ask me a follow-up question.
To be fair, I think he was using that word like colloquially. I don't think he actually meant like the medical definition
Yeah,
of insanity.
that's all I was gonna get. Like if they walked in like a hospital and like I'm mentally insane, they'd be like, no, you're not.
I think
you're just like a really bad.
I don't
dude."
think Saddam Hussein was insane,
Smile.
but
Saddam insane.
Yeah. Saddam insane Hussein. Dorian does like a pun like that in the aftermath show here.
Yeah.
you can be evil in this world without being like mentally unstable.
Yeah.
Like you're very conscious of what you're doing. You're like,
Yeah.
no, I want to do that.
Many
Yeah.
of the things Saddam Hussein does, like it did in his time as president, was very calculated, very conniving. Like he knew what he was doing.
You see the strategy in a lot of
Yeah,
stuff.
if he was insane, it would be way more sporadic of like whatever he's doing. But yeah, it's like cold and calculated.
Yeah. So like, Exactly.
I get what they're going for on the show.
Yeah.
Know? And
Like,
it's
I'm not
not
gonna
the
give
worst X Factor. I'm trying to
I'm not gonna give him a
get
hard
pissed at the
time.
X
Sure,
Factors this time,
I'm not
but I
gonna
will in a minute.
I'm not going to give him a hard time for his word choice because we see the actions
Sure.
he does, and we do think like there has to be something wrong with him.
I did want to mention Bobby D also mentions that Pol Pot is doing something he's never seen in history before, trying to remake history in his own image. And to quote Brendan, when we watched this episode together, have you studied any history? I'm also going to quote Winston Churchill and just say history is written by the victors. It's been a thing for a really long time.
Yeah.
There's plenty of people that write history in their favor. So he's not the first guy, although point taken, this guy is like, he calls his campaign year zero, like we're going to remake Cambodia. Pretty fucking wild.
What does Khmer Rouge translate to? Isn't it something like...
Khmer Rouge? That's an interesting
Probably
question.
I'll look it up. I'll let you know.
I think it's something that like
Something
sounds
red.
like... Yeah. It's definitely... I mean, it's obviously something red, but...
Now, next X Factor is initiative. So the Khmer Rouge get the edge. Pol Pot gets an 83 to Saddam's 74. I'm just going to... Any thoughts on this initiative? What does it mean?
It means they rolled a d20 when they
Yeah.
first started the battle. And
Right, yeah, exactly. Like,
Okay, hold up. Yeah, they had me at the beginning, right? They come out when they're like two X Factors that are like, I could be like, okay, those are reasonable. Then we get to like fucking initiative. And the one
does
that's
that
coming
mean?
up next. Yeah, what does that mean? What,
Initiative
it's-
to kill people.
Yeah.
I
Well, like, oh, is he
guess-
going to be standing there in the beginning of the battle? Like, I got to wait 10 seconds before I can move because I don't have enough initiative.
Because initiative means like...
what
You get to go first, like you're catching the other guy by surprise, so it does offer
are they referring
level of
to,
advantage.
like Pol Pot's initiative in like overthrowing the government?
Is this
Yeah.
D&D?
Is it like the driving force behind their like dictatorship? Their
Yeah,
initiative
so is, like-
would make more sense to me.
is
But
the-
yeah, they're taking it in like the literal like.
Yeah, is the context
gonna
more
take
like
the first
political?
shot.
Yeah, so I guess like my best guess is they're taking this very specific battle scenario in the sim, like what we see in the reenactment. Like
Yeah.
the Khmer Rouge, because they're a guerrilla force, are going to be able to surprise the Republican Guard. Like they're going to get the drop on them. The other explanation I had was maybe this is a stand-in for like aggressiveness, like the fact that the Khmer Rouge are going to strike first. They're going to be the first to throw hands. They're going to take the initiative. I don't know why I said that, but they're going to take the initiative.
Yeah, Saddam
But it's
Hussein,
kind of confusing.
notorious roles to engage follower.
Right, yeah. So that's I guess you're splitting hairs here, and initiative really depends on the situation. Like there's going to be situations where the Khmer Rouge are sitting at a compound, and now if they were smart, they'd have lookouts like the IRA. But
Happy
the
St. Patty's Day.
IRA had lookouts. And the Republican Guard would get the drop on them probably in some situations, but I don't know. It kind of doesn't make any sense. You guys have any thoughts about it?
No.
Okay.
No.
Khmer Rouge, did you find anything?
Yeah, so I mean, Rouge is red, and I'm pretty sure Khmer is like the ethnic people of Cambodia.
Yeah.
And I think like part of Pol Pot's plan was like he wanted, in a way, like Aryan race for Hitler in Germany. Like he wanted just the pure ethnic
Yeah,
Cambodian
Khmer
people.
Red.
Yeah, it's
Communists. Yeah.
He didn't want like people that were like part Vietnamese. That's why he hated the Vietnamese. So yeah, it's just red Khmer. Red Cambodia.
No, I think that's the hidden one.
That's a hidden one.
Yeah.
We'll get to it. So, Killer Instinct.
What?
Saddam gets an 86.
What?
Pol Pot gets an 89.
Yeah, his troops just couldn't ever finish those kills. Just couldn't do it.
What? Okay, I'm gonna Google and see what's like the internet give me. Oh Jesus, let me close that up. Killer Instinct.
The first two X Factors were
All right,
like,
I hate that game.
Fucking
yeah.
game definition.
You can play as the Arbiter in Killer Instinct. Isn't that crazy? He's a playable character.
So, Killer Instinct is a ruthless determination to succeed or win. So I guess it's just is all about like who's more determined between Pol Pot and Saddam.
Yeah, Saddam. No.
We had four
I
X
guess
Factors.
this is rating like their extremism.
I could not imagine rating this on a scale of 1 to 100.
Right.
That's
Like,
fucking
Their
impossible.
numbers are so close. I don't think they knew how to list it
Yeah.
on a 1 to 100 number.
I think this is just the show's way of saying like they're both bad, but Pol Pot's just a little bit worse.
Yeah.
In our opinion.
The last two are dumb. We had 4 X Factors this time. The first 2 were like vanilla ice cream scoops. And then Robert Daly just proceeds to pull down his pants and just do a nice big swirly turd right on top. And then bloop, the little cherry falls out at the end.
Robert Daly, man, he is probably going to be number 1 this season on our pod. So a fun fact I read online is that there's a bonus segment in the live showing that showed each dictator's preferred method of torture. Pol Pot's being electric shock and Saddam's being a chemical bath. We do see clips of both those things
That's
throughout the
interesting.
episode.
So it's something that is not in like the.
Those are your
They
special.
edited it out.
Yeah, it's
That's
not
crazy.
not
Those
in
are
the
your
Amazon.
special weapons.
They probably thought about like, should we do a whole segment where like chemical bath versus electrocution?
Yeah, you know what
Yeah,
crossed their minds.
Yeah, that probably.
I thought about that when you brought up the knives, Dan, and you were like, honestly, it would be more entertaining to see the electric shock. And I think they probably thought about that
Yeah.
and then just
Like, no, that's too far.
that was the line they drew.
But in the original broadcast, they had that.
yeah,
Yeah.
That's crazy.
they had a segment. Yeah,
Good
that's
thing
what I
they
read.
found the
They
line
aired
and
on
didn't
TV.
cross it,
Like
I think-
the first time.
I think so.
I
That's
think it's
That's like lost media.
yeah.
Isn't it still in the Amazon?
No.
No, I didn't see
They
it.
they show little clips of like a guy getting a chemical bath, but there's no segment where they're like, all right, so let's take a look at both their torture.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't remember it because that episode came out a long time ago, and I just don't remember.
Fucking over 10 years ago, 12 years ago.
So I don't know. You guys have any last minute thoughts before we get into the reenactment? Apparently, there's a hidden X factor, dominance.
Yeah, what is the hidden X factor?
Saddam Hussein gets 78 to Pol Pot 75.
I do agree
Sure.
with that.
Whatever.
He puts the Dom in Saddam.
Yeah.
Who cares?
Who cares? I think we're ready to get into the reenactment. Toss it over to the Sim Grandmaster.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am your Grand Sim Master Lucas, and welcome to probably the most offensive and out of touch sim of the season, yet somehow like the funniest of this season. Why?
Thank you to Fahim. He really selling this.
He really carries his role.
Two people probably didn't need to be on the show, but oh well, let's put them in the sim anyway. If everyone's ready, let's rev up those fryers. So go ahead and hit your enter buttons now. Put on your 3D glasses now. We open up on Saddam Hussein in a meeting, probably going over a memo about how to be a dick while his men are standing guard outside. Meanwhile, Pol Pot and his men start moving into the village. They're getting in position. I don't know what for, but I think it's finger licking.
What the fuck?
I didn't write that on my notes. That's an old Tenacious D song.
It's just their initiative.
So they definitely just use this time to set up. Where am I at now? Oh, I was saying this is the set they use all the time for like their terrorist footage, pretty
Yes,
The terrorist.
yeah, it is like
much. Their terrorist footage.
yeah.
Jeff
Anytime there's-
Damelin's like jihad tape.
yeah.
So anyway, one of Pol's men takes out his Chinese stick grenade and lobs it at the two men by the gate. Good thing there's no rolling factor on that because it takes out two guys when it blows up with this ridiculous explosion. Then all hell breaks loose and the men start opening up with their machine guns. One of Saddam's guys throws his RGD-5 and it blows up. One of the actors needs an Oscar for his performance from falling over from that grenade. He's like, from behind the pole. Then Saddam and his other guy go to the balcony because he hears the commotion going on and shoots down on Pol's guys. They kill one of them and he dies, just getting riddled with bullets. So,
Yes.
we get a close-up as he reloads his bright orange magazine, just so you know it's difficult to reload the gun. I don't know how he does it, brother. Then Pol Pot picks up the dead men's machine gun and starts firing upwards. Should have stabbed upwards. In fact, most of this battle right now is just people firing back and forth with machine guns, missing every shot.
I read in the Wikipedia fun fact is that like the RPD gets no kills in this reenactment. Not a single one.
It's literally like 5 minutes, 10,000 bullets were fired, and like 3 of them actually hit anyone.
See, that's that training though. That's training in Killer Instinct.
Suppressive fire.
And then it happens. Pol Pot and his men start moving towards the building. Just then, Saddam spawns in one of his sedans out of fucking nowhere, comes hauling ass around the corner. Pol and his men open fire on the car as it speeds towards them, and they shoot the driver in the head. And Saddam throws off some harsh language in the back seat. Pol Pot then does his most ridiculous front dive you've ever seen to dodge the speeding car as it wrecks and blows up like a Fast and Furious movie.
This is supposed to be a 50-year-old man, by the way. And he does a flying squirrel
He
dive.
yeets himself over the...
Obviously, the stunt actor's landing on a pad, but like the guy in the shot is just smacking into the road. Like that's what he's landing on. Just like belly
In universe.
Yeah.
Oh, the car didn't blow up enough for you yet? Why don't you open fire on it with your machine gun and make it explode again? But what Pol didn't see is Saddam snuck out of the back. Meanwhile, Saddam's final henchman does a sneak attack from around the corner and opens fire. Then we go back to position 1, where they're just back to firing back and forth with machine guns until Saddam takes down one of the guys with his handgun. It's like...
There's a part in this sim where one of the Pol Pot guys is getting like fired on by a pistol, I want to say, and he does this move behind the skinny pose for cover, and it's like his whole body is still showing like what you're before I think Pol Pot cleaves him with the cane knife. I may have jumped ahead, but go ahead.
Saddam's henchman runs out of bullets and retreats inside, and then Pol Pot and his guy gives chase. Saddam guy gets a drop, but misses with the handgun and gets cut down from behind with Pol Pot's farming tool. I mean, just 2v1. This whole part, there's like this little dark corridor or whatever at that time, and Pol's like, oh, go check it out inside. And the guy goes over, he's like, oh, it's clear, come on in. And then Saddam just creeps out of the shadow and stabs him. And kills him with the knife. So Pol Pot fires off some rounds, heads inside, sees Saddam hiding around the corner. There he is. He's got him. It's about to be game, set, match.
Yep.
He runs up.
I'm lurking in the shadows.
Turns the corner and slams his knife into the body's neck. I say body because it turns out it was a dead man wearing Saddam's coat. I don't know where he had the time to set that up in like the 5 seconds.
Like Sun Tzu had like the extra pair of clothes.
Yeah, always keeps an extra pair of clothes. He looks up just in time to see Saddam's gun against his head. And Saddam blows Pol Pot's brains out with an Allahu Akbar and whatever else he says.
Yeah, he gives like an action movie line before he shoots him, but I guess I could have turned on subtitles to find it, but I couldn't understand what he was saying.
Either.
I was hoping the online trivia would say it, but I didn't find it anyway. So if you speak Arabic, you can drop it in the comments below. Like, what does Saddam say before he shoots Pol Pot in the head?
You know, I always refuse to say it, so I'll say winner, Fahim Fasil.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
You get him, Fazli.
I would say before the results are shown, we get Fahim Fazli as Saddam firing. It's all good. Firing his RPK into the sky and just making like the most Looney Tunes face. He's like,
Oh shit! It's in the wiki.
is it?
Fahim Fazli at this end says, "This is a weapon" in Arabic.
what a line. This is a weapon.
Amazing.
It's my gun.
Nice.
Like what?
All right, shout out.
So I pull out my gun.
So
Fahim Fazli. What is it? Fahim
Fazli.
Fazli. Why do I struggle with his last name so much?
Because you're
Like Fahim
racist.
Saddam Hussein, terrible man in real life, but he plays like one of the funniest characters.
Oh, yeah.
And then, like a sim.
Fahim's pretty great in this.
He does less of a job to bring to life the real Saddam Hussein, but he brings to life the South Park Saddam really well.
Yeah. So total battles won. Saddam wins 2,828 battles, which is 56%, to Pol Pot's 2,172 battles, which is 44%. The RPK gets 53% to the RPD's 47%, whatever that means. 47% of what? We don't know. The Browning gets 62% versus Tokarev's 38. The RGD5 gets 41% to the stick grenades 59, and the combat knife gets 54% to the cane knife's 46. So this is indeed the biggest landslide of season 3, even though it seems like relatively close. The show seems to mostly credit the superior training of the Republican Guard for the victory. This does follow in the show's past logic, as the biggest gap ever recorded on the show was Spetsnaz versus IRA.
Probably the closest matchup in Deadliest.
Right, in season 1 Back for Blood. So it's this similar narrative of like a highly trained unit versus a guerrilla unit. And they I think Robert Daly specifically says, like, the Republican Guard is really trained to destroy rebels and insurgents, and that's what the Khmer Rouge are.
I heard you have a guerrilla unit.
It's
That's
a
what
combat
the
knife.
G unit stood for with 57 was guerrilla.
Also, really quick, Lucas, you should start taking notes from the Wikipedia page on your sim, because listen to this. Pol Pot and 2 of his men quickly head him off and fire on the automobile, with Pol Pot's Tokarev shooting the driver in the face and killing him, making Saddam very angry.
Oh, shucks.
So before we get in the aftermath, what are some thoughts about the results, boys? Let's start with Craig. Any thoughts? Is what it is.
For how terrible this episode is of an idea, I think the results are like decently.
I want to point out, Matt, you're asking me to either defend Pol Pot or defend Saddam Hussein. So I'm going to abstain from Saddam Hussein.
All right. What about you, Scotty B? Any thoughts on the results here?
No, I think I probably agree with it.
Craig, you're pissing me off. I'm about to go.
I mean,
Hussein.
objectively more combat against like real opponents. I feel like from just what I've kind of read and followed in the show and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And two, like just Pol Pot's army is a bunch of teenagers, like, inevitably, like that has, if you're taking a fight, regardless if it's guns or not, like I want a 25-year-old versus a 16-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
So better equipped, better supplied, probably better training. Yeah, I'd probably agree with the results.
I agree with the results, but like I condemn you for making me choose in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Listen, I didn't make you come on all the controversial
I
episodes.
pretty much just agree with Scott with like the better trading, better weapons, better pizza, Papa John's.
That's about the 20th time that line has happened on the show.
And it gets a laugh every time.
Every time. So
Broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
all right, Craig, take us through the
Papa John
aftermath. Going to Craig's aftermath corner.
All right, welcome everybody to Craig's Aftermath Corner. So a lot of the stuff we've already covered. The panel is Dorian, Rick Frankura, and Klung. There is a minor moment in the beginning of the Aftermath where Kieran welcomes everybody to the show, and Klung breaks the awkward silence by giving the most pathetic. He's like, thank you for coming on the show, and Klung's like, thank you. It's a minor moment, but I thought it was kind
It's
of
almost
funny.
like going on that show has finally sunk in.
right.
He saw the episode right before this and was like, oh my God.
Got fresh off their watch party.
Yeah.
Right. Dorian says that, quote, for the first time on Deadliest Warrior, he was hoping with warriors, both warriors would lose and the Sim would be the winner. So that implies that on Nazi versus Viet Cong, he was rooting for one side.
Right.
Oh,
I didn't think about that.
Let me dust off his white knight armor.
Yeah, right.
Now that he's already made the show.
I was hoping both warriors would lose and the Sim would win.
I know I got cut a check to do this episode, but I swear I felt guilty about it the whole
Daily
time.
comes back. I swear it keeps crashing.
Would you be happy or sad they said both warriors lose?
In a
That
dead
would have been
even
kind of
draw.
fucking awesome.
It's like the Green Beret versus Navy SEAL, where it's like for the first time it's a 50-50 tie.
It was actually, the score was 0-0 because they refused.
Yeah, right.
It was a 0-0 because they're both already dead. Forget
Right.
them.
Kalung tells a story about how he dreamed of what he would do to a Khmer Rouge soldier if he saw him again in real life. He went to Cambodia in 1999, and some guy offered to torture and kill the Khmer Rouge soldier for $800.
What a bargain.
Kalung says there was no established government at the time. He could have gotten away with it, but said he'd moved on.
Well, good for him.
Powerful
Yeah, respect.
moment.
Let go of it, you know.
Imagine you could just end someone's life for $800.
Jesus Christ.
That's awesome.
You torture him first.
Right?
What if Kalong's lying and he did it?
Oh my God.
Jesus.
It's dark.
I think it takes a lot of strength to do what he did.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Like, I respect that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
don't be the mature one.
You know what's fun?
To
I'm
go
glad.
through that and to actually, like, we always say, like,
To forgive, yeah.
yeah,
Yes.
that's always like the trope, but to
breaking
actually follow
kayfabe,
through.
You gotta respect moving on and forgive. That's the hardest thing to do in this life.
Almost as hard as going on Deadliest Warrior.
I'm glad that this aftermath like progressed to where the questions are from real people with like first name, last initial versus I think like season 1 it's like a lot of Twitter handles.
I like this.
Because he gives like a whole big speech about that story, and then what's his name? Kieran goes into like, okay, next question, and it's like, what if that next question is like from Smoke Cheddar the Ass Kid? Why was the RPK not or get more kills versus the RPG work out the edge type stuff?
The next question is from Ball Tickler.
Now that I think about it, to do such a morally like commendable thing in Cambodia, and his payment when he comes back to the U.S. is to be on the Deadliest
That's what
Warrior
I'm
show.
saying. Like, that was the only bad decision he made, was going on Deadliest Warrior.
Right. Dorian says that both Saddam and Pol Pot would say that they were the deadliest warrior of all time.
Fair.
Sure.
Probably.
Yeah.
Rick says that the reason the RPD won in the edges but lost in the sim is because the drum mag was prone to bell jams. Here we have, and this is the problem, is the guests ask about, a sim question, but we have a guest expert answering it, which is obviously a problem because what the fuck does he know about the sim? Mm-hmm. So him saying that the drum mag was prone to jams, like first off, Dorian's like, I'm not touching this one. Like he doesn't even chime in. And it's saying that the sim is so complex that it thought of a weakness to the RPD that even the experts on the show couldn't figure out.
So
That's a pretty good
I told you,
point.
it's gaining sentience.
Yeah.
I made that argument
It's like
last
Watson.
time.
So this is interesting because they obviously a producer was not on set for this because usually their objective with sim talk is to run interference and be like, well, it's perfect or whatever. We get people who are on the episode telling you, yeah, behind the scenes, the RPD had problems jamming and we had to fix that many times on set, which to me is someone in the episode telling you that what you're seeing on screen
Yes.
is fake, that the timestamps are fake because who knows where he jammed the gun
Yeah.
or when it happened. And also it confirms our theory that every reliability test on the show is fabricated, is part of the narrative of the episode, because here we get admitted from the guy shooting, in this test, I think, or one of the guys there saying, yeah, this had jamming problems. This belt-fed system had reliability issues, but we don't see it in the episode. So obviously they can cut it out when it's convenient.
When we get a real jam, we don't see it.
But when the Gatling gun needs to beat the Vickers, the Vickers jams on screen. You know what I mean? So I thought this was an interesting slip up in the aftermath that no one caught.
Speaking
But I caught
of infinitely complex sims, just a fun tidbit. I usually will write out my long form notes in paragraph format and then just punch it in the chat GPT. Give me one bullet point for every paragraph that I wrote. And that helps me out, keep coherent. If you mention this episode on chat GPT, it denies its existence.
Wow, that's next level.
It says there's no record of Saddam Hussein versus Pol Pot.
Oh, it happened.
There's no getting rid of
That's
it.
awesome. Yeah, ChatGPT it hates Deadliest Warrior.
It does.
It will always mention how the show's fake.
Yeah.
Every time you bring it up.
What? No.
Yeah, it always emphasizes that there are many historical inaccuracies, and it's the most complex way you could say it's just trash.
Right.
I was joking with you guys that their information for that is they've fed every episode of the Deadliest Warrior podcast into Chat GPT, but apparently it doesn't know the podcasts exist.
Oh,
so
what?
that means to me that Chat GPT is a girl.
That means to me that it doesn't exist.
It's a girl.
Yep.
Also, it's not aware of even the most popular podcasts on YouTube.
Well,
So how advanced can it be?
How advanced is
we
that?
should stay on Deadliest Warrior for now, but the reason is, one, its information cutoff is 2021, so there's a certain point in the past it can't go back to. And the second reason is it can't pull data from YouTube. Like it can't look up like information.
Dan, don't give us the real answer.
Okay. It's a girl.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
Calvin Bonley told me that women age like milk.
He does say that on his Instagram. Well, yikes,
But yeah.
Well,
right.
let's finish out
Yeah, go
Craig's
on.
Aftermath Corner. So Dorian says that the environment in the sim was an urban environment. Wait, I thought that it simulates multiple environments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
What the
it's
hell?
just urban this time.
Well, it's urban in mountains, in
In a
grassland.
volcano.
Yeah,
It like
there's-
spawns in buildings on top of like mountains, and like the skyscrapers are like sideways loading in.
At
Can
one,
we see the sim for the lava environment?
so I was about to say, at one point, Saddam's got the combat knife and Pol Pot's got the cane knife, and they're fighting on Mustafar with like the falling cables and stuff, and Pol Pot's floating on like that lava droid thing. Swinging. Shout out.
Saddam had the high ground.
He did.
Don't try it, Pol Pot.
You underestimate my power.
Yeah.
Carrie even mentions that, like, yeah, the sim should be multiple environments. Dorian, whose job it is to defend the sim, says that although the sim usually simulates all of the weapons data in different environments, they realized all of the tests were in an urban environment, so that's why they only ran the sim in an urban environment. And then also has to defend the reenactment that it's not real, because some people, I think, are asking, like, isn't this the reenactment really the sim?
Something
He
smells
says-
like shit in here.
Oh, yeah.
It's one version of the Sims battles, so I don't know what the fuck's going on.
So you've reached this point. I don't know if there's a philosophical term for this. You've reached the point where there are two camps, okay? Is the sim real or is the sim not real? And on the side that the sim is real, it is so exceedingly complicated and divided into such small groups. Like, yes, the sim is real and it does all territories. Yes, the sim is real, it only does urban, or it only does depending on the episode. Yes, it's real, blah, 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 1,000. There's like an endless amount of ways you can cut it up and say what's real and what's not based on what they've told us.
Well, don't forget they run it 3 separate times with X factors, without X factors.
That it makes, when you just look at
Is the
it.
Sim busted?
When you Robert Daly's asking if it's busted. They run it multiple times. When you just look at it in those terms, it becomes exceedingly likely that the correct answer is not any of these tiny pieces of the pie, but that it's just not real.
That Robert Daly's a buster.
I used to be in the boat of that middle ground where it's like, okay, there is something that at least runs code in the background, but it's just like, might as well be D&D character sheets. Season 3 even took that away from me.
Yeah, I feel the same way, Dan.
Yeah.
Real quick, just to close out Craig's Aftermath Corner, Matt stole my thunder already, but they talk about the bees and then say that this is the episode they switched from a syrup-based formula for blood to soap-based.
Oh,
So if you notice that the blood is
bath
different,
party.
The path.
yeah, that's why it's soap-based. But that's it for Craig's Aftermath Corner.
Nice.
I'm gonna go pee again.
Craig, I think you missed though. Doesn't Dorian gives us the line like insane Hussein and crackpot Pol Pot.
I did miss that. I'm sorry.
They switch over to the soap-based blood. 3, 2, 1, set them up.
All right. Before you leave, Craig, do you have any final thoughts on the episode?
No.
Okay. How about you, Scott? Any final thoughts on this episode?
I'm just kind of surprised they went back to the well for the distasteful factions.
Yeah.
And boy, do they seem to pull out all the stops for distastefulness for season 3.
I really want to see the electric shock versus
Yeah.
the chemical bath. So bad. I love that was a segment. Dan, what are your final thoughts?
Look, I'd feel really bad about this episode and all its baggage, but we can take comfort in the fact that this is preventing many genocides in the future. So I can come away with this episode hands clean.
Lucas?
If your hands weren't clean, you'd need a bath. This episode just
Good thing
feels,
there's a party for it.
now that I said that sentence, I could say this episode just feels dirty.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like a grimy episode. The Sim's like the best part of it, like everything else, and Calvin apparently is like
He's a
part of
meme
it.
king. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It's just not a good formula for this episode, and they like really half-assed like all the guns and tests.
Yes. What
We don't
the
even get like
hell?
any narrative. I don't even know what did we watch? What was like the 30 minutes of the episode?
I'm gonna be real with you guys. I probably would say this about everything. I liked like recording this fucking podcast episode of it better than watching.
Yeah,
So,
I did
like,
not like this episode.
Who is this for?
I don't mean
the classic
I don't
question.
mean to be too negative, but this is just my general thoughts. Most of the time about an episode, I either liked it or I thought it was meh. Yeah. There's like maybe a couple that stand out that I don't like. This is one of them. Like, and I think it's not even because it's distasteful. Like
That just adds.
I'm not going to pretend to be on some high horse. Like I can't watch.
That's one of
Pol
many
Pot
factors.
killing Saddam or whatever. It's not even that. It's like just a boring episode. Like we covered so much interesting history about these guys, and like Scott, you were like, yeah, he died of natural causes, and I'm like, oh, Craig said that. Yeah. Whatever. One of the podcasts said it, and the guns we get. It's like, why are you just bringing like the same guns that are completely interchangeable? Like if you've got these warriors that are selecting from like the same general arsenal, maybe have a particular reason why they're bringing something that they're bringing. Like, oh, the Khmer Rouge, this was the most prevalent gun, and then maybe give the Iraqis the more advanced version of that gun or something like that. Or like they did with the Viet Cong. Now, I don't really like that episode in particular but one thing I do like is that they have like booby traps for the Viet Cong. And even though
That
it doesn't,
episode's more watchable than this.
it doesn't really work, it still like is very memorable that they test like punji stakes. They test like that Pomsey F1 combo, whether that was actually used or not. That the Viet Cong used like these booby traps because it's guerrilla tactics. It's like, we're just going to set up these traps and a conventional army is just going to walk across this and it's going to get into your fucking head, because if you're an average Joe soldier who's there for like a year, everywhere you go, you're thinking like, is there going to be like a bomb just sitting there? Is there a bomb here? Is this person an agent working against me? And that would fuck with you so bad.
Yeah.
And we didn't get anything guerrilla from the Khmer Rouge. It's like they get a cane knife.
Yeah, there was some like
Uninteresting.
Right, yeah.
There were maybe like a few interesting tidbits in this episode. Like what was the general's name?
Captain
Sabah. Like he's the only one in the show who's ever met like the warrior he's representing.
Yeah.
So
And I feel like we hardly get anything about it though.
Yeah, he was
exactly like
Yeah.
anytime they have an interesting tidbit to build off of, they don't use it.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, let's move on.
Yeah,
This
they
is definitely
have
like
a-
bottom tier.
Yeah.
Someone who
When we do our tier list of all the episodes, this will
Someone
be
who's-
like D or F.
straight up a like Khmer Rouge genocide survivor who was there. And then you have this Captain Sabah guy who actually knew Saddam personally, had a gift from him. Like, and I feel like they're completely underutilized. Even the American like retired military guy that they get on every episode now, Rick Francona, was the fucking personal advisor to General Norman Schwarzkopf, and they ask him like nothing.
Yeah.
He's
I
there to
forgot
be
he was even in this episode.
He's there to be a translator.
Translate, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And it's like, holy shit, they could have asked these guys so much. We could have learned so much interesting like history, but instead so much time is spent just telling us, number one, they're bad, and then number two, what's better between two 9mm pistols? What's better between two light machine guns chambered in the same round that served during like the same years? What's better between two knives, one of which is not a knife, it's a bayonet? Like, I'm sorry to be neggy vibes about this, but it's a boring episode.
My least favorite part too is like what 10 minutes of this episode is just like real footage and just constant clips of people being gunned down and stuff.
Yeah.
And like when you think about the context of it, you're like, come on, man.
Again, this comes off to me as like they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. They want the shock value episode, and I think Fahim Fazli, the reason we like his performance so much is because he's playing into what you would normally have on Deadliest Warrior, where he is like a cartoon parody of this figure, and so it's entertaining to watch because you know you're watching you're not watching a fucking documentary here. Yeah. You're watching a Spike TV show where we're gonna blow some mannequins up and get some fake blood.
I enjoyed the episode more knowing what I know now about Fahim Fazli. Yeah. But like, I think there's definitely a reason this one escaped my memory from the old days.
You could really sum it up with that Dorian line at the beginning where he's like, maybe we'll prevent future genocides with this episode, and you know, we're not celebrating these guys, and Jeff goes, nope. And it's like, but you kind of are, right? I mean, that's
absolutely.
The show is Deadliest Warrior, which is...
You're calling them warriors for starting.
I'm sorry.
Which has like a positive connotation to it.
Yep. Is a positive title. And I don't know. So...
I have to re-sign into my my email.
You guys ready to wrap it up? Anybody got any final thoughts?
Let me just make sure Calvin did not reply to my DM.
We're working on it. We'll put a video up if he does.
If he does reply, you guys will know.
Yep.
We'll be in touch.
All right. Check out Calvin Bondley's Instagram. You won't regret it.
Your potatoes will.
Thank you, Scott and Dan, for coming into town to film this episode.
Of course.
Pleasure to be here.
I will add a little note that this is the end of an era, folks. This is the last episode that's going to get recorded in this room, in this game room of my apartment.
Fight Club.
The Fight Club.
I will remember you.
Yeah, Scott was saying have like Time of Your Life by Green Day.
We're going to get the acoustic guitar now. We're going to do
this is where we've always filmed our episodes, and I am that's because I'm moving to a different state. I'll still be around, and this won't be the last episode you see in this studio set, but this is the last one that gets recorded here. So we're gonna cut to a new Fight Club for, I don't know, episode 8. I think we'll have the new Fight Club in it.
You can fucking name a number. I have no idea what you get.
I'm on season 1. Any final thoughts, guys? Any farewells to our Fight Club?
Farewell to the Fight Club. I'm gonna miss it. Farewell to this episode. I'm not gonna miss it.
Yeah, epic.
Yeah, shout out to taking this room the absolute maximum length it could be.
Yep.
Yeah.
The tripod for the camera.
We have really crammed in here. So
And listen, it works.
Yep. All right, guys. Well, thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next episode, and as always, stay deadly.
Stay deadly.
Stay deadly.